Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
And it actually does appear that we were muted there for a minute. For some weird reason, the microphones did not turn on. But nevertheless, we are live. A huge apology for that, everyone. For some reason, right there, we were not live. So, Matthew, let's do that intro again. Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and it's amateur hour tonight, but it's good to see you all once again. And it's day 1260 of the War News stream, and we have some massive news today that Putin is scheming another risky plan to stall NATO sanctions today. We're also seeing that Israel's attacking Lebanon with airstrikes, and also the U.S. has deployed a nuke sniffer plane towards Russia after recent nuclear threats. We have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments inside of Eastern Europe and around the world in terms of diplomatic developments. We have been able to hear that as of today, in the midst of negotiations conducted between the United States of America and the Russian Federation over the war in Ukraine and the impending August 8th deadline, within its final hours, the President of the United States has declared the Russian Federation to be a major threat to the United States' national security and strategic ambitions around the world. At the exact same time, the United States of America has publicly deployed WC-135 Constant Phoenix aircraft in into the area of Eastern Europe to operate as nuclear sniffers in the event if there is any sort of an additional action taken by the Russian Federation in the form of their nuclear threats. We have also been able to hear that in the midst of these negotiations, it appears that the image is mixed, but largely not optimistic. While some slightly optimistic statements have been made by the President of the United States and some Russian diplomats, it appears that the real answer is that things are making it practically nowhere. The Russian Federation apparently laid out their clear ambitions for what they would be looking for to end the war in Ukraine, but we are once again expecting that these ambitions are far too bold and far too great, much like they have been throughout the past. And for that reason, the United States of America appears to also be moving forward with secondary sanctions against the Russian Federation, meaning that at this moment right now, we are in the final hours leading up to a permanent change in the war in Ukraine. Either the war will start to wind down very rapidly through some sort of a negotiated ceasefire or negotiated peace settlement, or this will start to rapidly wind up into a major world war on the face of Europe. In the meantime, however, we have been able to hear that the United States of America, by orders of the President's executive orders today, that the Republic of India is now effective immediately to a 25% tariff for the continued purchase of Russian oils and petroleum products from the Russian Federation in violation of United States impending sanctions. Once again, largely suggesting and showing us at the moment that the Russian Federation will most likely be sanctioned coming forward tomorrow. There is a high chance that that will happen. We have also been able to hear in the meantime that the first Russian forces for the Zapad 2025 military exercises coming in a few weeks are already beginning to arrive in the city of Grodno, as we have been able to see picture and video evidence published by the Russian Federation's armed forces themselves showing that these forces have arrived inside the region. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic of Iran seems to be dealing with issues of its own, as the Lebanese government today has actually started to move forward with a proposition, or at least the notion, of possibly forcefully disarming Hezbollah, a armed terrorist faction operating throughout the country. The Israelis are currently airstriking Hezbollah to a significant degree within the southern area of the country, but it appears that the Islamic Republic of Iran is actually threatening that they will encourage Hezbollah to conduct terroristic actions against the government of Lebanon if the Lebanese government attempts to move forward with such an action. Meanwhile, inside of East Asia, we have also been able to hear that the Chinese Coast Guard was operational near to the coastal waters of Taiwan today, as heavy U.S. military activity in forms of aircraft have been seen, and we've also been able to see further U.S. companies cooperating with the Taiwanese government to try and provide them with arms and equipment to be able to prepare for the defense of the island nation if and when the war between China and Taiwan actually kicks off. Outside of that, we have been able to hear the Ukrainian armed forces once again struck multiple targets inside the Russian Federation overnight, including a significant metallurgical plant inside of Bryansk, as well as a railway station on a main line in Volgograd, and also an S-400 appears to have suffered a catastrophic explosion near to the area of the city of Rostov-on-Don just earlier today. Ukrainian armed forces have continued to hold their front lines today and have also continued to inflict high casualties onto Russian Federation armed forces. Today is a fairly significant day as far as the developments that are going on in the diplomatic field as well as militarily inside of the Ukraine war. We are going to be making sure to cover in as much detail and as much depth all of the developments that we have been able to hear over the past 24 hours, starting with the largest development of the day, which is generally the U.S. diplomatic dialogue that is being conducted with the Russian Federation through the U.S. Special Envoy that is currently in Moscow. We were able to confirm that Witkoff, the Special Envoy of the United States, did meet Vladimir Putin earlier today, which we can actually see in a video right here published by the Kremlin, showing the U.S. Special Envoy meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and we were then able to hear later that there were some minor developments that came out of this meeting, but it doesn't appear to be anything incredibly large. In the midst of this conversation, or largely dialogue that was being conducted between the Special Envoy and the President of the Russian Federation, we were able to hear that other statements, largely showing the contrary, were happening inside the United States, as the President of the United States has declared that the Russian Federation is an extraordinary threat to the United States of America, largely showing that there is an absolute declaration of a lack of faith or trust by the President of the United States in the Russian Federation, and that they are still being viewed as an extraordinary threat to the United States on a national security level as well as a strategic level. We also were able to hear that it appears that the President of the United States is still planning on moving forward with secondary sanctions. According to the Secretary of State, we were able to hear that the President will decide within the next 24 to 36 hours focus on the possibility of imposing new sanctions against Russia. We largely do understand that this will most likely be followed through, as we already were able to hear over the course of the day that a 25% tariff has now been imposed by executive order by the President of the United States against the Republic of India for its continued trade with the Russian Federation for their oil products. This generally appears to be suggesting, at least at the moment, that the President of the United States will most likely be deciding to move forward with these secondary sanctions. Otherwise, the declaration of this executive order today, which is imposing a 25% tariff on the Republic of India's goods, would generally start to show us that if the president was not willing to follow forward with secondary sanctions, this would have absolutely no ground or footing to be able to have any kind of impact on the Russian Federation so far. This will start to put significant economic pressure on the Republic of India to either end their petroleum trade with the Russian Federation or to continue to suffer significant economic damage, at least in terms of their economic partnership that currently exists with the United States of America. Still, we have also been able to hear in other developments from inside the United States a lot more that is starting to show us that things are not as straightforward or as optimistic as a lot of people were trying to paint it, or slightly try and paint it, at least in the picture of the diplomatic scene that was developing today. And that actually begs the question, considering that the president did say that there was great progress that was conducted while also declaring the Russians an extraordinary threat, does it appear that there was any sort of a groundbreaking development, at least in terms of getting towards a peace settlement? And Matthew, it appears that a lot of people have had a great deal of comments and opinions on that already. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So, of course, Witkoff did meet with Vladimir Putin today. We did see that in our earlier article. So now that the U.S. president is saying that, quote unquote, great progress has been made, despite calling it not groundbreaking, what are your thoughts about the entire situation as to where it stands right now? So 68% said nothing has changed, not a good change at all, while 18% said it's too early to tell, and 10% said it sounds like Russia might talk now. And honestly, to me, it sounds like nothing has actually changed, because we're not even told specifics about what Vladimir Putin even wanted. The whole progress here that was allegedly made was that the Russians finally told the West what they wanted to end the war. But notice that the president of the United States did not tell the public what that was, and there's no reason for him to hold that information back unless it was really bad, in my personal opinion. So I would guess that Putin probably told the U.S. that he wants to take all the territories that have currently been conquered by Russia. He wants to keep them, and also he probably wants to continue fighting in Ukraine to a certain extent, and he might agree to maybe a partial ceasefire or maybe not. But it sounds to me like Putin is playing games and trying to stall because he knows the Friday deadline is coming up very soon, and he's trying to prevent the secondary sanctions from being put on the Russian economy. So I would say nothing has changed, and in fact, this indicates a last-ditch, a very desperate effort by Putin to put off the deadline, basically. So hopefully the U.S. doesn't give in to this, but it's pretty clear and pretty blatant what's going on here. But I'm with the 68%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be with a 68% as well. I do not believe that anything has changed, and I believe that the situation is the one that we've been seeing for years at this point. The Russian Federation has made it clear through multiple diplomatic dialogues with the state of Ukraine, the United States of America, and multiple attempted third-party intermediaries, such as the Republic of Turkey and the Republic of India. They have made it incredibly clear that they are not looking for a peace in Ukraine unless if it results in an absolute Russian victory. That means that if the Russians laid out any sort of a idea for peace or their demands, they were most likely as ludicrous as their prior demands, where they were making mountains out of molehills for the large part, if we want to describe it in that sense. The Russian Federation is not going to be attempting to find some sort of a common ground with the West or some sort of an amenable peace. It is also incredibly clear, much like Matthew said, that because the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, or the Special Envoy made any public mention today about Russia's specific demands, that also is giving us the understanding that Russia's demands are as insane and ludicrous as they have been in the past, most likely including the exact same demands that we've seen made multiple times in Istanbul between the Ukrainians and the Russians. And that would include the complete annexation of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, and maybe even additional coastal oblasts that the Russian Federation does not even have contested at the moment on the battlefield. We will most likely see that the Russian Federation would declare that Ukraine is a neutral state that has its military cut down to size. And we also would additionally see in some of Russia's craziest demands that they actually demanded a complete withdrawal of NATO forces from the Baltic states and Poland, as well as Finland, which are all NATO members and have the sovereign right to allow or invite any armed forces of any other nation that they are on good standing with to come to their country. With that in mind, at least on their prior demands, both the ones that they have made that we generally consider to be normal and those that we consider even by a Russian standard to be unreasonable, were most likely the demands made today. And that does not mean that just because they have simply stated exactly what they wanted, that we're finally a step closer to peace. As a matter of fact, we're probably a good step farther away from a peace at this point, because they have exactly stated, most likely once again for the 9th time, exactly what they want, which is completely unacceptable. So I would have to go with
Also, one other thing as well. Notice this. The only thing the United States is currently asking for is a temporary ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. That's all the U.S. president is trying to go for. It's not like he's asking to permanently end the war. Like, obviously, that's the goal, the end goal in mind. But the immediate temporary goal is to simply come to a partial ceasefire at least. And all Vladimir Putin has to do if he truly wants to end the war is say, okay, we agree to a temporary ceasefire and we'll go for it. He could just simply say that. You don't need to meet with Putin. You don't need to have endless phone calls. You don't need to be pen pals with Vladimir Putin to make that happen. All you have to do is simply say, agreed, let's do it. And let's then negotiate to end the war. The fact that they came and get past that first hurdle and we're still at that point right now shows you how really far gone the situation truly is, that they won't even talk. And also Vladimir Putin won't even agree to actually show up on a certain date to speak to the U.S. president in person. He still failed to give a date on that as well.
Which is a great insult, mind you, in realistic practice. If you're saying that you are willing to meet with the head of, the leader of another nation, and you don't even give a specific date, that is quite truly stalling in its most basic form. There is no actual plan at that point to meet with the President of the United States. It's just something to dangle it out there like a carrot on a stick and go, oh, eventually we might meet. It's never going to happen. But beyond that, I would have to be with the 68% or the 69%, which it was just a moment ago, that are saying that nothing is changed and nothing is really going to be looking that beneficial, at least at the moment, that is coming out of the Russian Federation or the United States dialogue that's currently being conducted today. Not only that, but while we are seeing that these sorts of actions are being taken, we are hearing that the first Russian armed forces are arriving in Grodno by train to be able to prepare for the military exercises in the Zapad 2025 military exercise campaign. This will be conducted near to the area of Grodno. I have to make this incredibly clear, folks, because the Zapad 2025 military exercises are actually incredibly concerning, at least even in their most normal form. They are conducted around Grodno, which is directly on the Suwalki Gap. These military exercises are a simulated offensive by the Russian Federation and Belarusian forces to rapidly advance into the Suwalki Gap, capture the city of Suwalki, and pretty much cut off the Baltic states entirely in the outbreak of war with NATO. The simple premise of the war game, which has been going on for years now, it happens annually, is absolutely insane. They are literally conducting a preparation for invasion exercise directly on the border, directly on the specific area where that invasion would be conducted if it ever was kicked off. And this year, it is believed, according to European Union statements, as well as multiple statements of other intelligence departments from multiple different countries in Europe and the United States, that this Zapad 2025 military exercise is actually going to be far larger than others that have been seen so far in the past, which may actually suggest that the Russian Federation is preparing, through the guise of this war game, an actual attempted invasion of the Suwalki Gap. We do once again have to remind everyone that even in its normal military exercise parameters, they build this force for the war game alone, specifically with the design purpose of invading and taking the Suwalki Gap. They have every single unit that would be needed to conduct that offensive present in the war game annually. If the amount of forces that are present in that war game this year are significant, somewhere in excess of 50,000 troops or more, that is going to be fairly concerning, because that is actually a large enough force, at least for this focalized local area of a front, to be able to conduct a lightning offensive to try and take the Suwalki Gap. That would be an incredibly concerning telltale sign that that actually might be the Russians' plan if they are not able to try and figure out some way to fool the West, at least at this point. And it also appears that the United States trust in the Russian Federation is incredibly low still, even lower than one would think, as we actually were able to hear of a somewhat more uncommon deployment of the WC-135 Constant Phoenix, which are the nuclear sniffer aircraft. We have been able to hear that the United States is sending some nuke sniffers towards Russia after the nuclear warnings were issued by Dmitry Medvedev and largely were backed up by the silence or compliance of the Russian Federation's government. The Constant Phoenix aircraft are specifically designed to be able to pretty much smell out any sort of radioactive isotopes and get an idea of any sort of nuclear activity is being conducted at some sort of an explosive level, or to be able to see if there is any sort of radioactive material anywhere around the surrounding area. These aircraft are deployed from time to time in Europe, and we do have records of the WC-135s being deployed in the latter part of 2022 and the summer of 2023, but this is the first time that we have been able to find from our records the deployment of WC-135s into Eastern Europe, at least over the past few years. This is also coming in light of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines publicly being deployed to counter the Russian nuclear threat, and this is also coming on the very cusp of the Russian Federation lifting their moratorium on the deployment of short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles. And I do have to once again remind everyone that every Russian variant of a short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missile, save for a few, are capable of carrying nuclear-tipped warheads. This means that these nuclear sniffers may be attempting to go out into the area of Eastern Europe right now and literally sniff around with their sensors and electronic systems on board to be able to see if they smell any nuclear-tipped short-range or intermediate-range ballistic missiles that are being deployed inside of the western regions of the Russian Federation. The chances of the deployment of nuclear-capable short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles, considering the lifting of the moratorium on the deployment of those missiles has happened, is somewhat low. We would generally assume that mostly only conventional missiles will be deployed, if not all missiles will be conventional in form if deployed by the Russian Federation into Western Europe, as deploying some form of a nuclear-tipped short-range or intermediate-range ballistic missile within striking range of an Eastern European state would be incredibly alarming at a minimum, and would be eking us incredibly close to the outbreak of a full-scale conventional war. So I would have to say that I generally would believe that these nuclear sniffers are largely, once again, an additional precaution, much like any others that have been made in the past, but not directly responding to an immediate incident that is happening right now, considering the low statistical likelihood of a nuclear-tipped short-range ballistic missile or intermediate-range ballistic missile being deployed with the Russian rocket forces that will be operating within Western Russia. But still, beyond that, a lot of people are still talking about the complete lack of faith that appears to be shown by the U.S. diplomatic teams and the U.S. Office of the President. And really quickly, I have to guide y'all through a lot of additional statements that we've gotten before we move y'all into our next question that we've asked all of y'all. We were able to hear that before the President of the United States and the President of the Russian Federation are to meet, the Secretary of State said that a lot has to happen before this meeting can take place, meaning that it most likely will not happen, at least according to the Secretary of State. We also were able to hear an additional statement by the Secretary of State. I won't be able to show y'all this video here, but I will be able to read y'all the subtitles, or largely the text of the statement that was made by the Secretary of State on Fox News earlier today. And I quote, "I think that what we have is a better understanding of the conditions under which Russia would be prepared to end the war. We now have to compare that to what the Ukrainians and our European allies want, but the Ukrainians primarily, of course, are willing to accept." That's not yet to be seen. And what you try to see is how far can you get these two positions closer? If we can get what the Ukrainians will accept and what the Russians will accept close enough, then I think there's the opportunity for the president to have a meeting that includes both Putin and Zelenskyy to try and close this thing out. So we got to get closer in that regard. But I think the first time, perhaps since the administration began, we have some concrete examples of the kinds of things that Russia would ask for in order to end the war. We haven't had much of that to this point. Obviously, the Ukrainians have a say in this. Generally, this
the funny part, or really, it's not really funny at all, to be honest. It's kind of irritating. The Russians have literally been saying in the public that what they want to do is they want to continue the war, and they want to take the entire country of Ukraine to rid Ukraine of this alleged Nazi threat that's there, which is obviously a complete made-up bullcrap. That's all propaganda. They've been saying that the whole time. Putin literally just stated that less than, I think, a week ago. So we've known what they want, and we now see the stalling tactics in front of our face now. We're pretending like we didn't see that.
It's a little bit crazy, and also I wanna cut through all of the political talk. Well, that's probably the best way we say it, the political kind of talk that's going on here, because all of y'all know that in general politicians talk in circles, and considering that the Secretary of State is a pretty seasoned senator, well, at least a former senator, now Secretary of State, he is incredibly familiar with the kind of political talk that runs around in circles. So let me break this down phrase by phrase, line by line, to tell y'all what's really being said. I think what we have is a better understanding of the conditions. It means that the Russians have made it clear what they're looking for. That one's a fairly obvious one. We now have to compare that to what the Ukrainians and our European allies want, but the Ukrainians are, of course, willing to accept. That doesn't mean squat. The Ukrainians have not made it clear that they're willing to accept any Russian demands. We don't even know the demands publicly. The Ukrainians know the demands that the Russians have made in Istanbul 3 times now, and they are not willing to accept those. They've made it incredibly clear that that's absolutely unacceptable terms. This is also showing us that this is not as straightforward as it would be. This is like saying, okay, let me like the cops show up to a domestic dispute, and the wife is like, my husband, he beats me and I'm very scared of him. And then the cops go up to the husband and they're like, okay, well, what do you need to do to stop beating her? She needs to stop burning the food, and I won't stop, I'll stop beating her to death. And then the cops go, okay, well, we're getting somewhere, you're not getting anywhere at that point. It's incredibly clear this is a bad situation. And it doesn't matter what kind of demands are laid out, they're not going to be accepted by the wife. I mean, that's an absolutely absurd sort of a thing, both on that level and the analogy and here in real life. Then getting on into these two statements turn into word soup, and I'll cut them down to make sure that they're as easily described as we can possibly make it. And what you're trying to see is how far can you get these two positions closer? That means that they're not close at all right now. That means that the Russians are off in fantasy land, la la land. They are coming up with unrealistic terms, and the Ukrainians have terms of wanting to retake most of their territory. So there's going to be
You know
no
what it
common
sounds
ground.
like? It sounds like that famous line that car salesmen will tell you when they're trying to desperately sell you a car that you don't want. They'll be like, "What can I do to put you in this car today?" And they're like trying to force you to basically buy the car. It sounds like that, like they're trying to force a deal that nobody wants to take, but they're just trying to force it anyway. It's like along those same lines.
Yeah, and look at this. This was ridiculous. This is literally negotiating, but just explained in simple forms. If we can get what the Ukrainians will accept and what the Russians will accept close enough, then I think there's the opportunity for the president to have a meeting that includes both Putin and Zelenskyy to try and close this thing out. In short, this says literally nothing. This literally is the basic premise of the negotiation in its outset at any point. Like the Russians could say, we want to exterminate every single Ukrainian, and you could still say this statement here and it would still fit. Maybe we can get them close enough to where eventually we can sort this thing out. You could say that in any situation with any demands that the Russians are making. The Russians could be saying, we're literally going to capitulate and let Ukraine annex us, or we are going to set up camps in Ukraine and exterminate every Ukrainian. And you could still make that statement either way. That says nothing. So we got to get closer in that regard. That also says nothing. But I think for the first time, perhaps since this administration began, we have some concrete examples of the kinds of things that Russia would ask for in order to end the war. This also completely cancels out, at least in terms of the actual verbiage, what he said earlier that they got clear demands. He said the kinds of things that Russia would ask for. So now he's saying, backing off of what he already said, we have clear demands finally. Now he's saying we don't even really have clear demands. It's just a concept of demands that the Russians could make to try and end the war. And now we finally have at least an idea of what they kind of asked for, although they made that clear 3 times in Istanbul. And of course, the Ukrainians will have a say in this. Generally mean the Ukrainians are probably going to say no because the demands are going to be outrageous. So that generally is at least what we have at the moment from the Secretary of State. In short, to cut this whole thing down, now that I've explained it piece by piece, this is saying literally nothing, and this is also a very political way of saying we have gotten absolutely nowhere, and the Russians are living in fantasy land, and we're not going to be able to make it anywhere with them because they're living in fantasy land and their demands are outrageous. That's pretty much the diplomatic way of saying that in this form. That's the best way I could put it out there. Meanwhile, we also got to hear from the President of the United States. There was a question asked by a reporter. The reporter asked today at the press conference, you said you would know if Putin was tapping you along. What gives you confidence that he isn't doing that this time around? The president answered, can't answer the question yet. I will tell you in a matter of weeks, maybe less. We're not really sure if this is a return back to the in 2 weeks time sort of a deal here, but it does appear that at least with the implementation of the 25% tariff against India today, the chances of it being 2 weeks from now sort of a statement is a little unlikely, as it does appear that sanctions will most likely be implemented against the Russian Federation. Otherwise, the implementation of a 25% tariff against India for continuing to buy Russian oil, although the United States wouldn't be moving forward with secondary sanctions at that point, would make absolutely no sense. So I'm not really sure what that statement generally flies in the face of everything else that's been said today by everyone. And we also got a statement from one of the Russian diplomats involved in the conversation with the special envoy and Putin, who also made his statements on a Russian state television network today about how it went. And this is the Russian answer as to how it went and how it's going.
Сегодня был утром принят нашим президентом. Что он мог бы сказать? Состоялся весьма полезный и
saying that the talks were useful and constructive. I want to make sure to break down political talk tonight wherever we get it. Saying that means nothing. That does not mean that it's a positive outcome. It just means that this could literally mean anything in terms of a political statement or a diplomatic statement. This could mean it was useful in knowing that we're getting nowhere, or it was useful in that we actually might be able to end this thing. So this means literally nothing as a standalone statement.
конструктивный разговор. Если назвать темы, то прежде всего, конечно, это украинский кризис. И вторая тема – это перспектива возможного развития стратегического сотрудничества между США.
Also, by the way, the main topic is the Ukraine war. The Russians are the ones who keep trying to force this idea of a strategic cooperation between the U.S. and Russia, which beyond the sentence alone, that's never been expounded on by the Russians to explain what strategic cooperation between the two nations actually means. So we don't even know, I don't even think the Russians know what that is. I think they're just saying that because it sounds nice, but it doesn't really mean anything in actual practice.
С нашей стороны, в частности по украинскому вопросу, были переданы некоторые сигналы.
Saying some signals were communicated means that we're pretty much still demanding for an absolute capitulation of the state of Ukraine, and we're not going to bend on that. That's what he's saying.
Соответствующие сигналы получены.
This is also saying that the other side heard them say that, and that they were present when they said it.
Президента Трампа. Сейчас ситуация такая, что наш президент владеет полнотой информации, то есть наши сигналы.
This is saying literally nothing.
Honestly, man, I tell you this, just listen to this guy right here. This guy is so skilled at saying nothing and sounding like he's saying something. This guy is honestly on another level. I've heard U.S. politicians do it my entire life. I've been following politics, but this guy is a pro.
This guy... Honestly, folks, if this guy moved to America and got some U.S. citizenship, he could actually become a senator or a representative overnight, probably. Man, the people be like, so what happened? So, some people were in the room, some things were said, some people heard them, some people didn't, things happened. It was a very interesting time, and I think a lot of people will be moving forward. The sun might rise tomorrow. This guy is pretty much saying this, honestly.
The missile knows where it is because it knows where it isn't, type beat.
Man, honestly, really, and he rounds it out. It's not any better while he's rounding it out.
Трампу еще в результатах этой встречи не доложено, поэтому я бы воздержался от более подробных комментариев.
He said he's going to refrain from more detailed comments. Oh my God, who is he fooling? He literally said nothing this entire time. He said he got signals, he got messages. We heard some things were said. People walked down the hall. They opened some doors, and it was a great meeting. That's what he said, the whole conversation.
Dude, this guy might actually be good at writing children's books. He's like, some people come into rooms, some people talk, some people walk, some people balk. He could do that probably pretty well. He might actually be a good children's book author with this kind of vagueness that he's got going on here.
Когда Витков сможет доложить о состоявшемся сегодня разговоре Трампу, после этого, очевидно, мы сможем и мои комментарии сейчас чем-то еще дополнить, более существенно.
He's going to add something to his remarks, which quite literally amounted to nothing in the course of a minute and 20 seconds. So this was the Russian response that was publicly put out on state television today. This is the only one I could find, mind you all. So this pretty much stands as the official Russian response to the talks today, which shows us that this is going absolutely nowhere. This guy said nothing. And so this is giving us an idea, just to break it down on both sides for y'all. all, the Russians are still demanding a complete capitulation in Ukraine, and the United States isn't willing to accept that, but neither side wants to say publicly that this was an absolute disaster and nobody made it anywhere. So they're using the political wordage to make it sound like it actually might have made it somewhere today, but it didn't. And so now with that in mind, now given all of the atmosphere that we have on the situation, I do understand, Matthew, that a lot of people have conveyed clear signals in the chat about a certain topic. Things were discussed, more primarily the idea of a sanction issue. Many people did talk about it and gave signals. Other people received the signals. Maybe some people even liked them. Maybe some people disliked them. But nevertheless, I have heard that a lot of people have been talking about this, Matthew, and I understand there are some people who would like to give signals and others who would not like to give signals, and I'll have to refrain from further comment on that, but I'll have to let you take this over, Matthew, and tell people about what might have been said or what might have not been said, or whether the sun's rising tomorrow, or whether it might not be. We can't really tell until it happens tomorrow. But what are people thinking, Matthew, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so the only thing that matters here, this is literally to the root of the issue. Friday is the deadline for the secondary sanctions that the U.S. is supposed to be putting on Russia, and do you believe the U.S. is still going to put those sanctions on Russia despite these brand new stalling tactics that Putin is trying to pull last minute? So 55% said yes, sanctions will still be put on Russia, while 29% said no, the sanctions will be delayed, and 7% said give it 2 more weeks. Me personally, I'm not a whole fan of the 2 weeks thing. I don't like that one bit. I'm going to personally say I believe the sanctions will still be done. I know it's a bit of a leap of faith at this point because in the past, the U.S. has generally sort of caved in to these stalling tactics, and even though it looks like the U.S. might cave in this time, I would say the statements by Marco Rubio saying that there's a lot of stuff that still has to be done before the president even meets with Putin, that's a red flag. Also, the president even said himself that it wasn't groundbreaking today, but it was progress. That's also another red flag. So it sounds like the sanctions will still be done. Now, whether or not they're as severe as they would have been otherwise, that might be another story, but I believe there will be some type of secondary sanctions, which could end up closing the door on talks altogether if it pisses Putin off enough. And honestly, hopefully it will, because we need to shut that door because Putin's a lunatic. He's not going to back down until Ukraine wins the war completely. So I'm with the 55%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, listening to everyone and what they said, many things were said, and a lot of people talked. And a lot of people said what they'd like to say. And a lot of people heard it. And a lot of people really responded to what they said. And so it was very optimistic. It was a very good thing because we now understand what a lot of people are thinking and what a lot of people want to do. But beyond that, outside of the whole joke about this guy literally talking in circles, I would have to say that sanctions should be done. Now, I can't say that they will be, because we all know that there's always a little bit of uncertainty as to whether or not the promises made in the office of the president will be followed through on or not. But I would have to say I would be with the 55%. The sanctions must roll forward on the 8th of August. And for that reason, they should be rolling forward, and the sanctions will be carried out. I have to make this incredibly clear at this point that on my personal beliefs on this situation, as far as America's position in the world, if the United States backs out now after clearly giving a specific deadline and date for actions to be taken, and if those actions were not taken, there would be substantial economic consequences for the Russian Federation and substantive financial and military support for the state of Ukraine to follow on that given day. If the Russian Federation still does not achieve a peace by the 8th of August, which will not happen at this point, sanctions should be rolled forward. It should be done. If it is not done, and I have a feeling that there is a small chance that it may not be done, I will have to tell y'all up front that that would be an incredibly weak thing to do. I would actually have to say at that point, the foreign policy position is the weakest it's ever been in national history. We have given the Russians a clear ultimatum that has been followed through for about a month. We gave them 60 days originally, and then it cut down to about a month. We said that the Russians better find a way to reach a peace in Ukraine, or that there will be substantive consequences to follow for the Russians. If we are going to sit here and let the Russians play this stupid game with us a second time, and we're going to push this deadline back out indefinitely into the wind, then it may as well show everyone around the world that America is a joke as far as our foreign policy is concerned. We have the largest economy in the world. We have one of the largest populations for a nation in the world. We have one of the largest militaries in the world. We have more power and more leverage than just about any other singular nation on the planet. Nobody even comes close. But as far as our ability to actually leverage that or use that in a situation where it will be necessary, either one a resource or the other, we don't use any of them, or we wouldn't use any of them because the leadership in the United States, no matter who it is too weak to make that necessary call, no matter whether it will be considered a happy one or a scary one. It's too dangerous, and therefore nobody makes the call. I would have to say with the 55%, the sanctions should be rolling forward on the 8th of August. If the Russians want to talk about strategic cooperation and a bunch of stupid stuff like that, they can, with the ticking time bomb over their head that their economy is collapsing as the secondary sanctions rolled forward. I think at this point, it's incredibly clear that the way that the United States ought to pursue this peace is that we ought to not coddle the Russians anymore. On the 8th of August, there needs to be a burner put under their ass to where they sit there and know the economy is quite truly imploding right now. It's not just slowly collapsing, it is imploding now. So we either are going to find this peace or we're going to be in pieces. That's what we should be making the Russians think. We shouldn't sit there and go, okay, now that they're saying the stupid stuff again for the 6th month in a row since the beginning of this new administration, we're going to push it back another couple of months. And then we're going to push it back a couple of another months on top of those months. And then it just keeps going on forever. The Ukraine military support is pretty much held up because of this as a result. And also any further actions to put a burner under Russia's ass to actually make them hurry up and get to a peace settlement or either get to fighting and dying across the whole of Eastern Europe isn't happening. During that whole time, it's an absolutely ridiculous sort of a thing at this point, at least with the idea of not pushing forward with sanctions. So I will tell you all this up front. Sanctions will be implemented on the 8th of August, and if they are not, then this is probably going to be the weakest foreign policy scene in history for the United States for the next 3 years. Because you don't make these kinds of deadlines and then not follow through on them. That's absolute weakness at its core.
I personally think that they are going to follow through with it. I know it looks shaky, and people are saying in the chat, I don't know, it looks like they might, back out again or something, which is a valid concern because we've backed out a lot before, which makes you think, are we going to do it again this time? But the truth is actually in the actions. If you look at it, we just put 25% tariffs on India today for the sole reason that India is still purchasing Russian oil. So if we were going to capitulate or back out and let Putin stall again, if we were truly going to let him do that this time, then we wouldn't have gone through with that action because we're trying to prevent India and also these other countries from buying Russian oil because we know that's going to cripple their economy the worst. So if we were going to back out, I suspect those tariffs would not have been put on India today, which makes me believe that likely it will happen by the Friday deadline. But hopefully they're not such light sanctions that it's not really going to affect the Russian economy. It could be possible that he puts sanctions on the Russian economy and then it turns out not to be effective enough to actually cause harm. That could be the situation as well. It's kind of hard to tell.
I would say that the sanctions ought to be severe enough that it cripples the Russians to the core. That's what it should be. It should be something that is so damaging it starts to implode their economy within a couple of months. That's what I'm thinking it should be. Because if the Russians want to keep playing this stupid game and keep on acting like the United States is a joke, we'll show them what a joke looks like. We'll turn them into the largest joke on the world stage by how their economy is performing in a couple of months. That's what I'd say. That's what should be done. Because if these sanctions are weak and they're token sanctions, that didn't do anything. That just emboldens the Russians. That emboldens everyone in the world because now they go, oh, look, the U.S. is too scared to actually do anything assertive and definitive that actually will cripple us, so we can do anything. It'll just be a slap on the wrist, and that will be it. This has been the situation, folks, for the current administration and the prior administration. At least if the president is currently to back off of the August 8th deadline and not move forward with crippling sanctions, not just sanctions in general, they have to be crippling. If he backs off of that, the prior administration and the current administration cumulatively are creating a situation in the world that is absolutely hell on earth. Has anyone ever seen, in just the past few years, or any time during your lives, this many wars breaking out in this many corners of the globe continuously? No. The answer is no. And why is that? That's because everyone knew that the United States was going to be roaring overhead with helicopters, aircraft, artillery, and everything else that could be imaginable to come and get your ass if you did something that they did not like. Very rarely did any wars break out throughout most of the Cold War and most of the post-Cold War period because everybody knew the United States will be there and they will whoop your ass if you mess around too much and they don't like it. And with the given situation right now, everyone in the world goes, oh, we can actually go at it. We can beat each other up. And whoever's on the American side, I mean, they're pretty much on their own because if anything, they're going to the United States will slap us on the wrist, and beyond that, they're going to do nothing. And if we do this again with the Russians and we back off of this August 8th deadline, I can promise y'all that it is inevitable at that point that Iran and Israel are going to be going back to war for sure. You can guarantee it. That Pakistan and India will be going back to war. They're guaranteed to be going back to war already, but they'll be going back to war for sure. Thailand and Cambodia, they'll be kicking it back off for sure. China and Taiwan, that will definitely be happening. All of these wars will break out because everyone on both sides will see if the other seems to be leaning towards the United States, that means nothing. They're practically on their own already. So I hope that addresses that well because and it's not even addressing it well enough because people have got to folks have got to understand, not just the leadership in this country, but the people of this nation. People have to understand there is something to be lost if we continue to roll over on our backs and show our bellies like we are around the world all the time. There is something to lose. Y'all know a country that actually did lose something? It was them, the Russians. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, does anyone think that that was a cakewalk? Does anyone think that that was a nice time? Y'all know what it was like in Russia? People hardly had food. Their money became worthless overnight. Crime was rampant on every street. The mafia ran your utilities, and if you didn't pay them, they'd just come and break your arm or knock your teeth out, and there was nothing that anyone would do about it. It's still like that to this day. They're still reeling from that. Even with how it is now, it looks extremely corrupt. It's exponentially better than what it was when the Soviet Union collapsed because we were able to strangle them out. And that's what the Russians and the Chinese will do to us. You think it's a good time right now, and you think, oh, my life is fine. I have some groceries. I get a nice thing here and there. I go on a vacation. Things are good, just like a Soviet citizen would, just like they did back in the day. Nothing looks like it's a big concern or a big rush. We don't have to go over there and do anything extreme. And then we let these things compound, and then one ally leaves, and then another, and then another, and then a whole economic sphere leaves us at a time. And at that point, we're hemorrhaging over here. We're losing everything. And the government's trying to keep it alive and make it look like things are going fine, but they can only do that for so long until the whole thing caves in. And then we're sitting here and we're living in absolute squalor. And then people will be looking back at that point when the country has lost just about everything and everyone is living in absolute destitution in this country, and then we'll be going, oh, well, we should have actually gone over there and we should have defended the Europeans and we should have defended Ukraine because we didn't know that we were going to lose our largest trading partner worth $1 trillion in imports and exports because of this at some point in the future. And oh, we should have been there to defend the Taiwanese because we didn't know that the South Koreans and the Japanese were pretty much going to create their own economic sphere or possibly start trading with the Chinese to try and appease a military giant right on their borders. And oh, we should have sat there and tried to make sure to protect our security assurances in the Middle East because now that oil isn't accessible to us because all of our enemies are making sure that it isn't, now energy prices have skyrocketed in this country. It costs hundreds of dollars a month just to try and heat or cool one room. Those sorts of things are things that people don't really think about until it comes around to get you. That's why the Russians are so apt to fight right now. And I'd promise you, I'd be sure as hell willing apt to fight right now for the United States because I would not want to live in a country that would end up like they did at the end of the Cold War. That was hell on earth for them.
I think you're going to get your chance because I believe the moment the U.S. decides to pull the trigger on these sanctions, which I personally still believe they are going to do that by Friday, I think that's going to permanently shut the door, or at least strongly shut the door when it comes to future talks between the United States and Russia, because at that point, Russia really has nothing to lose. If we put secondary sanctions on their oil and we prevent other countries from buying it, like India, because we're putting tariffs on them, that's going to cripple the Russian economy no matter how bad Putin talks. So I think at that point, you're going to see Putin act a lot more rash. He's going to have nothing to lose, and he's going to be basically backed into a permanent corner. And in my opinion, that'll shut the door permanently for talks.
I would have to say I think it certainly will. But I will also have to say, because of the poll, just around this whole thing out, I am with the 55%. Sanctions are either going to be implemented on August 8th, or they definitely should have been. If it's anything other than that, I will tell y'all, I'm going to be very unhappy with that. Both Enforcer Matt and me are going to be incredibly unhappy with that because we've already been talking about it today. But they should be implemented. And so I'm going to be with the 55%. But I also understand that a lot of people are talking about the deployment of those nuclear sniffers. And once again, to remind y'all a little bit, I don't want y'all to be a little bit too alarmed about this, so I just want to explain it, because I'm not trying to turn this channel into one where they sit there and go, oh, the nuclear bombers are flying, everyone's going to die. This is something that has happened in the past, over the past 5 years, at least 2 other times from what we can tell. The latter part of 2022 and the middle part of 2023. WC-135s were deployed to Mildenhall in the UK, and they conducted some nuclear sniffing operations in Europe. Nothing happened as a result of those 2 times that they were deployed, at least from what we can see on public record. They are being deployed again, straight to Mildenhall, and they will be operating throughout the whole of Europe. These aircraft are designed to be able to sniff out radioactive isotopes. So if there is any refined uranium-235 out there, with the kind of sensors that this aircraft has on board, they can actually pick them up from a very significant distance away. So if anything is nuclear armed, they will be able to see it, and they will be able to tell exactly where it is, based off of the sort of sensor equipment that is on board this aircraft. So this does not mean that there are nuclear bombers going to Europe right now. These are not nuclear armed aircraft. They can just sniff out with their sensor equipment where nuclear weaponry is. So with that in mind, a lot of people have been talking about the deployment of these aircraft to Mildenhall in the United Kingdom, and why in the world they're there and what they're doing. And it seems as though a decent amount of people have had many different opinions on this. So Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 44% of the audience said it's only precautionary and it's totally fine. It's not like a sign that things are about to escalate dramatically, while 34% said it is a big red flag for new escalations by Russia, and 14% said it seems ominous but needs some more information. And it is a bit of an interesting deployment, I will say that. But also at the same time, though, I think it largely is precautionary, because we just publicly announced the deployment of nuclear submarines from the United States to the Russian coast. That's already a nuclear escalation in itself. So I think naturally you'd want to also put an early detection system, which is the Constant Phoenix, over there closer to the target. So just in case something did happen, you already have the early warning system in place to test and see if any type of nuclear usage has taken place. So I believe it's totally precautionary. Hopefully it is. But of course, when this thing is deployed, that obviously makes some people turn their heads and think, hey, wait a minute, what's going on with that? That's a nuclear aircraft, which is designed to detect nuclear explosions. So a little bit concerning to see it, but I think it is precautionary. I'm with the 44%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd agree with the 44%. This is entirely precautionary. It's not showing that any nuclear action will be commencing soon. It's just precautionary to follow through with the U.S. government conducting all due diligence to respond to the nuclear threats that were made by Medvedev. So nothing extreme. We're not getting nuked. This is just to make sure that we're following through with some level of due diligence. Still, it is uncommon to see these deployed to Europe in the present day. But nonetheless, it's nothing that's extreme, and it's nothing that's showing that everyone's going to end up dying. So just want to make that clear. So I'll be with the 44%. It's nothing too major. But with that, we are going to be moving on out of that news, and we are going to be moving on into some more news that we have been able to get over the course of the day, specifically inside of the middle of the East, or really, no, we won't get into the jargon of like the Near East, the Middle East, and the Far East. It's a whole thing. But beyond that, we also will be getting into a little bit of news in East Asia as well before we get on into the Ukraine war frontline news. But before we get into that, I do have to say really quickly, folks, that I've got to thank the 100,000 people who have watched the stream up till this point in just the first hour alone. And I also have to give a huge thanks to about the 16,000 people who are here live watching the stream. If you've been enjoying it so far, I hope that our news has been pretty well researched and accurate tonight, and I hope that we've been able to tell you all a lot of things that you're not actually hearing out in the normal news, because the normal news seems to be allergic to actually covering major foreign policy events and developments. But if you are enjoying this right now, please make sure to subscribe. We'd love to have y'all here. We cover this news 6 days a week, every day, but Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single night, and you can pretty much expect the same kind of research, analysis, and information to be put out every single night. We also have an amazing community here called the Lee Spring Army, which is the folks in the live chat, and they're a pretty fun group of people to get to talk to. A lot of them have a great deal of knowledge and intelligence, far beyond ours, actually. So if you want to join us, welcome to the Lee Spring Army, and welcome to the Enforcer channel, and I hope you do subscribe. But nevertheless, it is time for us to get on into a couple of questions, at least for the moment, so that way we can make a clean segue into the Middle East and East Asian news. And Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, and also, by the way, real quick, I did see a couple of people asking questions about the Constant Phoenix, which is the code name for the nuclear sniffer. Let's see, Tiger Stack said, don't they have satellites that can detect radiation and also nuclear usage? They don't have a satellite that can pick up on radiation contamination. They don't have that yet. Satellites are largely visual, so that's pretty much all they're limited to basically to operate in is visual surveillance. So they have to send in the aircraft, which has equipment on board, which basically samples the air in real time, and it detects all types of different particulates, including radiological contamination and also other types of contamination as well. So they have to send the aircraft physically there to be able to collect the air sample. So that's why they have to do that, just to sort of explain that in a very basic way. But anyways, jumping into our first super chat here, this one is going to go to none other than Thomas Miller. He throws in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Thomas, for that $50 support and helping to keep the channel running. He said, thank you for bringing and going on with the news, and you guys are great at it.
And thank you so much for the kind words, Thomas Miller. We try our best. I hope that it was a good show tonight so far. We still have a lot to go, actually. But I got to thank you massively for the kind words and the support, because folks like you help us to be able to keep this kind of great work going and to put out the news every single day. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. This channel is entirely supported off of pretty much the viewers themselves. Y'all directly. So we're kind of like PBS in a way in that sense. We're directly crowdfunded through y'all to be able to keep this thing running and do this as our full-time job. And I got to thank you incredibly so much for enjoying us bringing the news and helping to support us so that way we can keep bringing it to all of the millions of people who watch this channel every single month. It's actually crazy, folks, to see, because just in the past 28 days alone, not in the past month, 7 million people have watched this channel in just the past 28 days alone. So by support from folks like Thomas Miller, he's actually helping about 7 million people a month to be able to hear the news of what's going on around the world. Pretty crazy stuff when you think about it in that kind of a way. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are going to make sure to try and keep up at it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second super chat goes to a channel legend. It is Rick Galenchin, our viewer from Canada, who puts in a 50 Canadian, and thank you very much, Rick, for that support once again and helping to keep the channel running. And he said, greetings from Vancouver, and I went through withdrawal last week without real news, but my vacation was awesome.
Hey, I don't know where to say hey or go dang, because honestly, withdrawals from news is tough. If you don't know what's going on out there in the world, and you're used to it, and then it doesn't happen, it's almost like being in an empty void. You just don't know what's going on, or at least it feels very unfamiliar. Me personally, it's like that for me. I always have to keep kind of apprised of what's going on out there every day, even when we're not working. But a big hello to you from Vancouver. That's really cool to hear that you're from Vancouver. And also, I hope you had a fun vacation. I know it must have been hard not to be able to hear the news every day, but I hope it was a fun vacation nonetheless, and that you're able to enjoy it and get back to watching this channel, so that way we can make sure to keeping everyone informed, as well as you, Rick Galitchin. And so I gotta say, I hope you had a great vacation, and thank you for supporting this channel once you return to be able to help us to keep the news on air and keep this channel rolling for the millions. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And also, I see some people also talking about, dang, that's crazy, 7 million views in 28 days. Yeah, that's actually fairly normal for us these days. Let me check that. Actually, we had, I'll tell you all this, because this is actually something interesting as far as metrics go. We had 7.5 million views over the whole of the month of July, and already in August so far, just in the first 5 days, we've had 1.5 million views. So it's quite a large amount of people who watch this show on any given day. But what's even crazier is that the amount of time that people watch this is insane. Just in the past 28 days, all of y'all have watched this channel cumulatively for 1.7 million hours. So really quickly to cut that down for y'all, because this is an insane thing to do math-wise. In 28 days, y'all watched 1.7 million hours of the Enforcer channel as a whole. So if we were to divide that down into 24 hours in a day, and then divide that by 365 for the amount of days in a year, just in the past 28 days alone, y'all have watched 194 years worth of Enforcer content as a whole community combined in the amount of hours that y'all spent watching this. So
well, I got a bigger stat than that. Over the entire lifetime of the channel, like literally from the beginning until now, it's been 175 million plus views across the entire channel and all of our videos, which is insane when you think about it as a raw number, but also at the same time, though, if you really think about it in the context of some of the biggest YouTube channels out there, that's like one really popular Mr. Beast video, like across our entire channel, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean that's just insane, really, to think about the numbers, like the kind of metrics, especially in the present day, just on the month-to-month level. But I got to say, huge thanks to all of y'all so much once again for giving a lot of y'all's time every day to listen to the news and watch it and enjoy it. And also, I got to thank you, Rick Glitchin, along with everyone else who's been supporting the channel tonight, for helping us to make this thing possible, helping us to keep it running, so that way that many people, millions of people, can literally put in hundreds of years worth a month of time into watching this channel. And so with that, it is time for us to move on to the last question of this segment and then on into the rest of our news. So Matthew, what do we got for our final question of this segment?
All right, and this one goes to Paladin Cards, who throws in an extremely generous $100 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. We do appreciate that. Huge support. They said, watch you guys nightly, and you're all awesome. And thank you for the kind words, too.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words, Paladin Cards. And thank you for watching us nightly. We love to know that people watch us nightly. It makes us happy to know that a lot of people find this to be the normal sort of regular news coverage that they're looking for and that they get every day. And I got to thank you for being one of those folks, Paladin. And I also got to thank you for throwing in the huge thanks and the massive support, because folks like you help us to keep this thing rolling. And I also have to make sure that we give a huge shout out to the Lee Spring Army, because the Lee Spring Army is an absolutely amazing community, more loyal than really any other community I've ever seen on YouTube. And we're absolutely honored and so appreciative to know that y'all give y'all's time and loyalty to this channel to pretty much use it as y'all's primary source of news. We know that most of y'all pretty much use this as your only source of news, and for that we are wildly appreciative, and we try and put as much time and effort possible into making sure that y'all get the highest quality news every single night. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, Paladin Cards. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news. We have a great deal of it, and really quickly, to make sure, just if you're joining us right now, if you're tuning back in or getting back to your screen, in this next segment we are going to be covering the Middle East news, the East Asian news, and also the Ukraine war frontline news. So if you're looking for any of those news topics, those are the big ones that are going to be covered from this point. If you're joining us right now, though, and you're wanting to hear about the major diplomatic developments of the day between the United States and Russia, we've pretty much been covering that for the whole first hour of the stream. So with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night. And we were able to hear that the state of Israel is now conducting a significant air campaign once again against Hezbollah forces within southern Lebanon, as we were able to see some significant airstrikes being conducted and seen on film.
غارة
We can hear the sounds of the explosions of the Israeli bombs as it appears to be hitting another Hezbollah strongpoint in the distance.
That's one thing nobody can ever accuse Israel of doing, is going into a war like a lightweight. Like, there's no such thing.
Man, Israel goes into a war like they have an unlimited military budget with the kind of bombs they're dropping. It's insane, really. And they do it with only a $25 billion military budget that's then subsidized additionally by another $25 billion given to them by the United States. So technically really a $50 billion annual military budget, but, you know, who's counting? Anyways, we also get to see more airstrikes footage from southern Lebanon as well in this clip right here. And if it loads... For some reason, there's been some technical difficulties lately, folks. I don't know what's up with this, because now Twitter just doesn't want to load this clip. It's crazy. But we'll be moving on to the next one then. Hopefully this one loads. And now Twitter's going to have an issue, Matthew. Why in the world does it do that sometimes? It's such a big question to me, because we've been showing video and picture evidence just fine tonight, and now it's going to take about a good hour. But here we go. Here we are. Here's another clip of the airstrikes inside of southern Lebanon. That's the end of that clip, but still showing us that the Israeli air campaigns in southern Lebanon are going in full swing. At the exact same time, the Lebanese government has actually started to float an idea or a proposition that the Lebanese armed forces will try and attempt an armed dismantling of Hezbollah by the Lebanese government, not from the Israelis, but but the Lebanese government. This has immediately been met by the Islamic Republic of Iran threatening the Lebanese government and stating the Lebanese government's plan to disarm Hezbollah will fail. That was according to the Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi. It does appear that for the Iranians to say that they have no connection to Hezbollah, they sure as hell come to their defense a whole lot whenever it seems that they're threatened, at least in terms of their existence. A little bit odd with that. Wouldn't you agree, folks? It's a little bit odd. It's almost like these forces really aren't proxy forces. It's almost like they're directly funded and operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. That would be kind of a silly, crazy notion, wouldn't it be, folks? To sit there and say something like that, to think that there is some sort of a country in the Middle East that is some sort of a radicalized Islamic regime, like the one in Iran, that is funding and supporting other radical Islamic terror groups. That'd be absolutely nuts. Who in the world could ever make a connection like that? Not me. I mean, wouldn't that be crazy? Like all of the radical terrorist groups in the Middle East all being connected to the same radical Islamic faction? Like Iran, that's literally entirely motivated by these crazy ideological beliefs that they have, like the constant attempts by this country to nuclearize and everything else. That would be nuts. That'd just be insane. But beyond that, Matthew, it does appear that a lot of people are talking about the Israeli airstrikes that were launched against Hezbollah tonight. And what are people thinking about that, Matthew? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so as you can see from the footage right there, Israel is going in a big way right now inside of Lebanon. They say they're hitting Hezbollah targets, and they're striking across the entire area of Lebanon right now. So clearly, they're taking on another big agenda right here inside of Lebanon. So what are your thoughts about that entire situation? 68% said Israel is right to deal with this issue right now, while 19% said Israel is getting too extended, and 7% said I'm 50-50 on the topic. And I'll be perfectly honest here, I am kind of leaning toward the 19%. Israel is getting a little bit overextended in my personal opinion, because right now they just committed to fully occupying the Gaza Strip. That's going to be a massive undertaking. They're also having to deal with the threat that Iran's going to probably attack them sometime in the immediate future. They also have the Yemeni Houthi threat, which is still a major threat right now to Israeli security. And then they're still dealing with the threat inside of Lebanon, etc. So they've got a lot of different fronts they're dealing with all at once. So was Hezbollah really the top of the list? I guess that's up to Israel, but it seems like they're getting their hands in way too many conflicts all at once, in my personal opinion, and they should probably take on just the ones they must deal with right now instead of taking them all on at once. So I'm kind of 50-50. I'm kind of with the 8% here. Israel, of course, has to deal with the threats, but the timing is a little bit of the question I have about it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that I would have to also be with a 19%. I think they're getting a little overextended. There's a lot going on in the region right now, and they're also attempting to annex, at this point, the Gaza Strip. Seems like a lot's going on, in my opinion, for them to be starting a whole new air campaign against Hezbollah and trying to start up that issue. Again, because from what we've been able to see, Hezbollah hasn't attacked Israeli forces in any major way within the northern border region to elicit this kind of a response. This is more so a continuation of the Israeli campaigns of old from about 6 months ago to try and continue the dismantlement of Hezbollah, which could have been held off till a later date, because it's not really like they're getting armed or supplied at the moment. They're pretty much in a vacuum, because from what we even know, al-Jilani doesn't even like Hezbollah because they keep getting into shooting battles with Hezbollah on the Lebanese border. So they're not getting any arms or equipment. They're just kind of sitting there in stasis right now. So I generally say it seems to be a bit of an overextension and something that could have been dealt with a little bit later down the road once this whole situation was dealt with inside the Gaza Strip. And I also I see some people, of course, bringing up all kinds of different comments about Israel. Some people saying the word Palestine doesn't exist, Israel doesn't exist. Really quickly to say this, depending on who you are or what kind of standpoint you take, all of those statements are true. Because some people don't know this, but the region that Israel is in was called Palestine really since the time of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire actually ran this province as the Palestina province. That's generally where it got its name from. But if you're Jewish, you call it Judea or Israel or something along those lines. And the only time that the Christians have ever run the region, at least in full form, it was actually called the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which was a Crusade-era kingdom that was created through the Christian Crusades of the First, Second, and Third Crusades. And then over the next 150 years, it slowly was whittled away and then eventually collapsed and then was generally absorbed into what could be described as the future Ottoman Empire. But generally, depending on who you ask, really any name fits. And honestly, any name does fit. I really don't care too much because it's like, does it matter if they call it Palestine, Judea, Kingdom of Jerusalem? Not really, because it's all describing the same geographical location. It's more so the factor of the question of what side is going to end up being supported. And as far as we have it in the region right now, there are only two different sides to support, at least within this region, which I would generally call Israel, because that's what is largely recognized as in the modern day. Are we going to support the terrorists that are funded and supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran, or are we going to support the Israelis, who are also overzealous to their own degree, but generally are pro-Western, or more Western-leaning than the other alternatives? They aren't chanting death to America, in short. Generally, between the two options, I would go with the one that isn't chanting death to America. That seems to be the best kind of answer that I could come up with, because that's what a lot of people don't really realize, that they get into this whole discussion and everything, is that the Palestinian people that live in the West Bank and Gaza ain't going to be the ones running this whole place if they ended up winning. It's going to be Hamas, and they're pretty damn radical. So it's like, is it going to be them, or is it going to be the Israelis? I'd rather have the Israelis there, because at least they're not wanting to kill Americans. That's really the basic way that you can boil it down. And also,
if the Israelis fully occupied Gaza, I mean that plan to like build the like nice hotels like outfitted in gold, that's still like the thing like to happen, right? Like I think the U.S. president said he's going to build like hotels on the coast or something.
I don't know if that's still being followed through on. That's a little crazy in my honest opinion, turning things into beachfront property. But I'm not really sure on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either. I remember there was a big like hoopla about they were going to build like the resorts or something on the Gaza Strip. Honestly, a little bit of a distasteful comment if you ask me, because obviously the region is highly contested. So to start mentioning the U.S. is going to like start developing the place into like some mega resort, that's probably not the best thing to say. But it sounds like maybe they backed off of that, I guess. But it seems like it's gone pretty much completely out of the news cycle. So maybe they've backed off of it, which would probably be the wise thing to do, considering that it's literally a hotbed right now.
Yeah, I would have to say so. And I see it's always an endless conversation with what's going on in Israel. But I got to say really quickly, folks, when I look at it, I don't look at like, I don't know why people act like they're invested, like this is the movie Avatar, like you can become friends with the Na'vi people. Here's the thing. There's one group here that doesn't want to kill Americans. The other group wants to kill Americans. So as an American, who am I going to support? I'm going to support the one that does not want to kill Americans. So that would be the Israelis. Because if y'all also remember, who in the world out of these two groups have taken Americans hostage? The Israelis or the Hamas inside the Gaza Strip? And out of the two, Hamas was the only one to take Americans hostage, and still are holding some of them to this day, right now. They're somewhere inside the Gaza Strip, and for what we can see, they're almost starving to death right now, or they're probably dead, one or the other. So when you cut it down to that sort of essential basic function, it doesn't really matter if you have a mosque or a synagogue there, or whether it's the Jewish people living there or the Islamic people living there. It's a basic sort of a answer, at least for the United States, because we really don't get into the whole side of religious theology here in America. We're supposed to have a division of church and state in realistic practice. Who in the world wants to kill us? And it's not the Israelis, so we will support the Israelis. Simply put, that's how it works. So with that, I hope that explains that with simple common sense, because I don't really know why a lot of Americans act like they're really invested in either supporting the Israelis or supporting the Palestinians, because to be entirely honest with y'all, I just don't even get it. It's like we're in there helping out one or the other for our interests, not theirs. Like, I'm not trying to sit there and go, yes, I love the Israelis, or I love Palestine, so I'm gonna completely forget that I'm an American and just act like I'm one of them. I'm not. Like, I'm not an Israeli, I'm not a Palestinian, I'm an American. So that's how I'm gonna assess the situation and come up with an answer. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on out of the Middle East and on into some more news that we've been able to get in East Asia. We were able to hear that the Chinese Coast Guard was present today close to the area of the southeast waters of the island of Taiwan. That took a second to get through. I don't know why. But we were able to hear that apparently they were being monitored by the Taiwanese Coast Guard and Navy to make sure that they were not violating Taiwan's coastal waters. In the meantime, Anduril has also started to open up some partnerships with the Republic of Taiwan, or the Republic of China, correction there, as Anduril is deepening its commitments to Taiwan. This week, they delivered their first tranche of Altus loitering munitions and supporting capabilities, built at risk before the contract was signed. This approach allowed delivery in just 6 months from contract signature, while Taiwan faces a $20 billion backlog in arms sales and years of delays. Anduril still delivers, which is great to see. Moving on from that, we also were able to hear that there was a heavy amount of U.S. air activity activity around the island today, as we were able to see multiple flights, including a R-135V, a GLEX, an E3, an MQ-4 Triton, a P-8 Poseidon, and an E-11, all operating generally somewhere near or to or around the island of Taiwan. It appears the United States is trying to conduct some additional surveillance, most likely in support of Republic of China's strategic intelligence capabilities, and that's the reason why there was a heavy amount of flights around this area. Most particularly, the MQ-4 Triton pretty much covered the entire coastline of China and the surrounding area of Taiwan, which is showing that they are trying to gather a great deal of intelligence on the military buildup in Fujian and other military districts or theater commands that are nearby. But
And also, by the way, didn't this coincide with the military exercises that we're currently conducting in the region? Because I'm not sure if it happened on the same day or not, but I know we conducted some amphibious landing practice and things like that using some of the marine equipment in this region. So was that part of it, or was that completely separate?
All this stuff appears to be completely separate because our military exercises were largely in, let's see, the Timor Sea and also in the Philippine Sea. And all of these operations are being conducted right along China's coast. So this appears to be more so surveillance and intelligence operations detached from the war games.
Interesting. Yeah. See, I was wondering earlier when I saw that, I couldn't really figure it out at a glance because I was trying to prepare other news. I was like, was this the same thing or not? But that's good to know.
Yes, it is good to know. It does appear that it's largely intelligence gathering operations. But moving on from that and out of East Asia and on up into Ukraine, it's now time for us folks to get into the meat of what's been going on the front lines in Ukraine. But before we even get to the front lines, there's one last layer of news that we have to cover, and that is the Ukrainian attacks that have been made into the Russian Federation overnight. First, we were able to see that the Ukrainians did attack and hit a metal structure and processing equipment plant in Bryansk, which we can see right here. That thing be smoking. Very nice to see. We also were able to see that the Ukrainians hit another rail yard in the town of Surovikino. Y'all want to see this rail yard? Let me show y'all here. Surovikino. Let me make sure that I'm getting this right. This wasn't Volgograd. Yeah, it's in Volgograd. Surovikino, right here. This is the rail yard. This is the train station. That's a tiny train station, actually. Ew! Oh my god, it's like aqua blue. Bro, that's terrible.
That's terrible. It's like the ice cream parlor or something.
Bruh, this rail yard looks like straight depression and broken dreams.
Honestly, right there, a lot of people would consider that artsy.
Oh, hell no, I wouldn't. That looks like hell.
No, not me personally. It looks like you go walk into the center of it and you get down on your knees and you go, why? It's like that's the type of place you do that.
Bro, that's like the day after tomorrow or something like that out there. Oh, look, it's a Lenin. They've got an old Soviet Lenin. And we also have the footpath, which I wouldn't trust. It looks like it's falling
Hell
apart.
no, I wouldn't trust that a bit. That looks very. Why are the columns so thin on that? Like, can you imagine if Mr. Lunchtime walked across that? That thing would flip.
Bro, this whole thing doesn't even have supports under it. It's like a couple of larger people on this thing. It's coming down. Also, their railway gondolas look like they're from the 30s still. And let's see, they got another picture of the Lenin. Always gotta love the Lenin. This is what oh my god, dude, this train station is the worst. Like, literally. Like, this thing is horrendous looking.
That is terrible right there. It's not exactly up to par with let's say the Los Angeles train station or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Los Angeles train station wasn't even like the biggest looker in the country, in my opinion, after being there. And still, it's way better than this. But anyways, beyond that, this is the area that we're about to show on film. So, here it is. There it is, toasting and burning out in the distance. Look at that. Surovikino and the rail yard was hit. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? We don't know if the building was hit, but we do know the rail yard was hit, so it may have been knocked out of operation for a couple of hours, or maybe a day while repairs are being effected. But still, beyond that, folks, I gotta tell y'all, Russian railway stations just don't compare, even at their greatest. Let me show you the difference in between the United States and Russia, okay? Let me go to this one. This is the Kievsky railway station. This is one of the larger ones in Russia. Look at this. This is the train station right here. It kind of looks okay. It's not bad, not the worst, but it's all right. Now, let's go and find a comparable alternative here in America. Why don't we go with, I don't know, Chicago Union Station? Why not? This isn't even the capital of the United States of America. This is just the place. This is just, a city. Let's look at it. Wow, look at that. The difference between America, and nobody even takes the train anymore in this country hardly. It's I think the ridership's in the few millions. It's not really a lot. But just look at this. The grandeur, the scale, the opulence. It's unbelievable. Look at that right there. You just wouldn't find this kind of stuff in Russia, even at its greatest. It's just not even comparable to America. And and generally, as far as mass transportation, we abandoned rail transport as the primary mode of transport about 70 years ago. And still, America's train stations look way better than Russia's. A little bit of a shame on their part that that's the case. The international airports are about the same story, but moving on out of that and on into our next bit of news inside of Rostov-na-Donu, we also were able to hear that it appears that an S-400 had some sort of a critical explosion today, or a catastrophic accident. It spontaneously combusted, basically. Apparently one of the missiles was faulty. It went off inside of its silo, catching the rest of them on fire, and it exploded. So that's what we know at the moment. So one of the S-400 launchers within this area blew itself up today, which is good to hear. It's a collateral loss in a way due to Russian incompetence and lack of maintenance. So happy to see that for sure. But moving on from that and all of Ukraine's strikes into the Russian Federation today, it's now time for us to get on into the front lines themselves. And moving on up into the Sumy front, which we haven't really gotten a lot of video and pictures out of, at least recently, we were able to see the Black Swan unit, the 225th, firing a Mark 19 grenade launcher, or automatic grenade launcher, at the Russians today. Let's take a little gander. Oh, there's the Russian. He's on the move. Now, where's those impacts at? Any second now.
How the hell you operate that is baffling to me. How the hell, like that, the math required to do that? I think that might be over my pay grade.
Dude, this guy just got sniped by a 40mm grenade launcher. I gotta be honest with you, I don't really know how he just pulled that one off. But the guy is gone. So that's a little nuts. I've never actually seen someone get sniped, literally in a one-shot, by a grenade launcher. That's actually a little bit crazy. But moving on from that and on into our location unknowns, we also got to see a Ukrainian mine-clearing vehicle. This one is a Padilla, which is pretty much like any other mine clearer. They're almost all designed the same these days, but still pretty nice to see. And we can see it working out there in the fields to try and demine them the best it can. It just happens to get rid of all the grass in the process, but it's still better than nothing. Moving on from that and on out of that bit of news, we also got to see a new Ukrainian trainer provided by the Czech company Dogfight Boss. This is the ultimate DCS World setup for those home pilots that like to fly in DCS World. This is an F-16 cockpit trainer that actually was provided for the Ukrainian Air Force to be able to train more pilots on the F-16's operational abilities, at least, you know, without them actually having to fly a jet. This is far cheaper, it's far safer, and not only that, it doesn't require a lot of money. So it does appear that this thing's been provided to the Ukrainians to be able to use. Pretty neat, actually. And also, it's got a lot of carbon fiber on this thing. That will certainly get Matthew excited. Look at that. I mean, that's like loads of carbon fiber.
That is probably expensive as hell, too. That's a huge piece of it.
Man, honestly. But, you know, it's really crazy, man, because they didn't have to go into all the detail of, like, the rivets and everything. But they did. Like, even the little labels, they got generally correct. This is pretty cool, actually.
That is pretty cool. I'd be curious to know what the cost on that was, just out of curiosity.
I would say probably over $200,000, but that's still way cheaper than the alternative, which is just putting an F-16 into as a training aircraft only. That would be way more expensive than this. So this is actually a pretty cheap workaround, and also they use a VR headset. So I would promise you, man, this guy is playing the military version of DCS World. I can promise you that. But moving on from that and out of that clip, we also got to hear of the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and the losses were decent.
Oh, look, they've only got a Bobcat after all this time. I can't believe it. It's been like, I think, a whole week since we had Bobcat losses. That's crazy.
I got to tell you, man, Bobcats, we can't get enough of them. We literally can't get enough of them because there's hardly any of them that are lost these days. But beyond that, Ms. Disa, keeper of the record, stated that troop losses the troop loss average rises over 1,000. Special equipment reappears after 2-week absence, and APCs disappear. Artillery and MLRSs are way up, and they certainly are. Over the past 24 hours, 1,010 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 0 APCs, 138 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 52 artillery pieces, 147 drones, 3 MLRSs, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. All in all, today was an incredibly good day for the Ukrainian Defense Forces, and it does appear that they were able to rack up a decent amount of casualties onto the Russian Federation. Moving on through the front lines, we did not get any video and picture evidence from the Kupiansk front, the Svatove front, the Severonsky Forest, the Battle of Seversk, or the battles around the area of the city of Soledar on the northern end of the former Bakhmut front. However, we did get a lot of video and picture evidence from the areas of the Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk battlefields, which seem to be the most active, at least from what we can tell in video and picture evidence over the past 24 hours. Russian Federation armed forces have made limited to no advances through most of these front lines today, but still, there was a decent amount of action. First off, we were able to see the Ukrainians conducting their typical fiber optic drone warfare activities, finding Russian positions and attempting to destroy them with the FPVs. And when you see this Buhanka here is about to become a casualty, and it now is a casualty.
I think that last truck there was already a casualty before they even hit it.
Man, honestly. Also, I see Carrion Crow saying, have you ever taken the train from Birmingham to, I think it's New Orleans in LA? We've taken the train from Birmingham to Atlanta, but generally the longest train trip that we ever took was actually from Los Angeles to Seattle. And that was a train trip for the ages right there. That one was actually really cool. Matthew has a different story about it. He actually hated it. He got sick on the trip. But I didn't, and I thought it was just the beans. But beyond that, we also were able to see more anti-drone activity, well, anti-Russian activities happening in the Ukrainian drone forces. This being conducted by the 36th Marines Brigade.
Oh man, they literally got the Temu picture of the Temu like ATV. That's it right there. Apparently, look, it's like one of those stunt ATVs. It's not even like a normal like off-road one. Oh, look, a Temu bike too. They've got it all.
Bro, everything's from Temu.
Oh, a Temu truck? No, it's actually not a Temu truck. That's a Mitsubishi. Oh, look, a thing.
Bro, that was just oh, they blew it up too. We don't even know what that thing is. It just got blown up.
What the hell? Did you see that they hit that thing while another guy was like zooming by on like one of those dirt bikes or something? He barely
What the
missed
hell?
it.
Bro, was he on a hoverboard? Like it looked like he was standing. Look at him. Bro, I don't even know what the hell he's on. But anyways, they did get it and blow it up. I actually didn't catch that the first time, man. But we can now see them hitting a Russian in a trench. And we now see them hitting a Russian in a ditch. And there goes the basement. We now see them lining her up and getting ready to go on another Russian. Oh, that one actually blew up in the weeds. And it appears
Look
that
how
this
green
drone-
this grass is right here. This is such green grass. Also, it looks like a little fire going on here, but it's like to see this like devastation, like the dirt just like messed up everywhere. And then all of a sudden, this like really lush green grass out of the blue.
You know, Matthew, you always get this thing. You always say the grass is greener everywhere else. I'm just kidding, by the way. But it was green as hell. I mean, look at this. Like that, dude. That's like that fake grass they have down in Florida that they spray paint green. You know, like in the medians and stuff.
Yeah, it's very fluffy.
Yeah, I wonder what that is, really. Like, I feel like that's probably, like, some sort of a crop, like maybe ryegrass or something like that. But anyways, moving on from that, and on from that clip, and further on out of the Konstantinivka front, and down towards Pokrovsk, we also got to see this Russian getting targeted by a Ukrainian dart drone today. Oh, bled! Oh! They missed.
That was like the slowest moving target ever right there. It seemed like that would have been an easier one to shoot down.
Yeah, and they still ended up missing. Like, how the hell do you even miss that? Like, I don't even know. That thing was literally flying at like a slow breeze kind of a speed that he still missed it. But moving on from that, we also got to see a Leopard 2A4 taking pictures from the streets of Pokrovsk. You can actually see the 120mm Rheinmetall main gun there in the picture. This picture was actually taken from the forward part of the turret, so you really don't get to see a lot of the turret, but this is actually showing what the streets of Pokrovsk look like from the view of a Leopard 2A4. Pretty cool, actually. But beyond that, that is actually all of the frontline picture and video evidence we got from Pokrovsk and Tourette's today. But the large part of the picture that we need to understand is that the Russians are still making limited to no advances, and anywhere that they're making even a little inkling of ground, it's coming at significant losses. Moving on from that and on down towards Kamyansky, we also get to see Ukrainians conducting airstrikes against Russian positions inside of the village. Take a look at this. You see a little Russian wandering around down near the houses, or what used to be a house. The Ukrainians are about to level it. And there goes the MiG. And there goes the bomb.
Those are the hammers, right?
I think they might be.
Seems like it. Look at that thing go. They are pulling some G's right there on that one.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that was quite an explosion right there. I think the house is gone. I think that's what they call a complete renovation. And they renovated it to rubble. You know, Andy, I need to talk like that travel guy that was on the TV yesterday. The Ukrainians dropped a bomb, and then it blew up the house.
No, I don't think so, man. Oh my goodness.
The Ukrainian pilot dropped the bomb, and then he took a hard turn. but moving on from that, and on out of Kamyansky, and further on down towards Kherson, we also were able to see that the bridge that the Russians did try and take out, and I'll show you all the bridge really quickly. I forgot the island that it goes to. Actually, it's the Kareli Island. It's right there. But this bridge right here that the Russians actually bombed ended up still standing after the bombing. So the Russians, much to their dismay, were not able to achieve what they wanted to. And they hit it again, and it still did not collapse. You know, folks.
Also, someone said that's how the BBC anchors sound. I think that's like the voice that the fellow puts on there is like trying to like put on that newscaster voice. It's kind of like generic, so most people can relate to it or something. I think, but I don't know. Like sometimes it's a little bit odd, like when you hear it too many times over.
But every single sentence is this. You know, it's every single sentence is that same structure. So you just fill in the words. You could be like, I got shot in the ass, and then I went to the hospital. It's the same thing every time. Like, same inflectuation, no matter the sentence. And you can make it an incredibly long sentence, and it still will have the same inflectuation. There's like a midpoint, I guess you could say, enunciation in the sentence, and then the end word, whatever it is, it's drawn out and made very monotone sounding. And I was like, Matthew had some person, I don't even know who it was on the TV the other day, and I was messing around with some model train stuff that I had. I was repacking everything, and was listening to this guy, and he was like, I had a breakfast in Copenhagen, and it was pretty good, or something like that. And I was, oh my god, he was doing it.
Everybody knows
sentence.
who you're talking about. The weird thing is, everybody knows who you're talking about. I'll say this: the guy makes pretty good videos outside the narration being a little bit different. It's pretty good videos, but the only reason I watch the guy's videos is because I think he reviews like expensive cruises and flights and stuff like that. Is I'm fascinated by it, but it's like kind of like watching reviews of like Ferraris or something like that. It's like, okay, I'm not going to have that, but it looks cool just to watch the video about it, but I'm not going to be able to get it. So it's like, it's kind of just watching something you really can't even, get.
Yeah, I mean, it was rough. Because like the content was, it would have been interesting, but I have a thing, folks, where I have to make sure that I kind of change the way I talk from sentence to sentence. The structure shouldn't be identical. It should be interesting to listen to someone talk. That's something you don't want it to sound predictable. And he would sit there and make every sentence sound the same. He'd be saying different things, and they'd sound the same. And I was like, please come up with something different. Say it a different way. And he wouldn't. He just kept doing it the same way. And I told Matthew, eventually I got it down. I was like, he's going to go like this, and then he's going to end out his sentence. And it would be perfect every time, the exact same pronunciations. But with that in mind, it's time for us to move on to the rest of our news, as we were able to hear from President Zelenskyy that he has said that he's inclined to a ceasefire. There does appear to be some attempt and a kind of peace, but what kind of peace, it's not really known. But beyond that, Zelenskyy did say that Russia looks more inclined to a ceasefire, but we're not really believing that is the case. That's more so optimistic statements by the president of Ukraine, but this is most likely not really going to be going much of anywhere. Nevertheless, if you don't believe what I said on it, make sure to get it from Zelenskyy himself, and that's actually going to be bringing us on into the speech for the day from the president of Ukraine. And so without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Весь день на Сумщині з нашими бригадами, героїчними хлопцями та дівчатами, хто активно захищає нашу землю, хто здійснив нашу наступальну операцію на Курщині. Сьогодні річниця Курської операції, дійсно української історичної операції. Ми перенесли війну на територію держави-агресора і досі ми діємо на її території. Ми довели, коли багато хто говорив про глухий кут та розчарувався в Україні, ми довели, що українці вміють діяти правильно. І ми довели, що багато російських погроз були блефом. Я хочу подякувати всім нашим воїнам сьогодні, кожному солдату, сержанту, офіцеру, всім учасникам, учасницям Курської операції. 1300 кілометрів російської території були під нашим контролем, і це змусило росіян не тільки відтягнути свої сили з Донеччини, але й просити по допомогу в Північній Кореї. Ми зірвали російський план розвинути удар на Суми та на Харків. Наші хлопці взяли більше 1000 російських полонених на Курщині. І таких, що це дозволило розблокувати, в тому числі, складні обміни. Одна з найважливіших сторінок війни. Я подякував сьогодні воїнам особисто 225-му штурмовому полку, подякував 80-й Галицькій бригаді, а також нашій славетній 95-й бригаді. Я пишаюся вами, воїн. Звісно, подякував головнокомандувачу Олександру Сирському, це його операція. Ми обговорили дії наші зараз на сході України, у прикордоні, на російській території. Ми обговорили питання, що потрібно військам. Ми все вирішимо і по пікапах, і по іншій техніці, по квадроциклах. Ми вирішимо також по фінансуванню для бригад. Багато речей спеціальних щодо вибухівки та конкретних типів дронів. Чіткі доручення для Міністерства оборони є. Все вирішимо. Була сьогодні доповідь міністра оборони Дениса Шмигаля тут на Сумщині про оновлення в міністерстві. Перше, максимум замовлень для українського виробника, щоб 50% зброї на фронті було нашою, українською. Друге, розвиток цифрових сервісів, всіх систем, зокрема Дельти. Третє, скорочення бюрократії. Четверте, чітка, дуже чітка комунікація з нашими бригадами, з підрозділами щодо їхніх потреб. П'яте, увесь комплекс питань щодо особового складу. Всі ми знаємо цю проблематику. Разом з військовими. Міністерство має це вирішити. І ще одне. Якраз дорогою від наших бригад тут на Сумщині я говорив з президентом Трампом, і це розмова після того, як представник президента Трампа Стів Вітков був у Москві. Наша спільна з партнерами позиція, вона абсолютно конкретна, вона абсолютно прозора, війну треба закінчувати. І робити це чесно. Це дуже важливо робити це чесно. На дзвінку були європейські лідери, я вдячний кожному за підтримку. Ми обговорили, що звучало в Москві. Схоже, Росія тепер більше налаштована на припинення вогню. Тиск на них спрацьовує. Але головне, щоб вони не обманули нас в деталях, ані нас, ані Сполучені Штати. І ми запропонували, щоб найближчим часом наші представники України та партнерів, наші радники з питань безпеки говоритимуть, щоб визначити нашу позицію, нашу спільну позицію і наш спільний погляд. Для нас, для України це дуже важливо. Україна точно захистить свою незалежність. Нам усім потрібен тривалий та надійний мир. Росія повинна закінчити війну, яку сама ж і почала. Я дякую всім, хто з нами, з нашим народом, хто з нашими людьми, хто з Україною, хто з нашою державою. Слава Україні!
Dang, he did that kind of quick, but Heroam Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, here on day 1260 of the news from around the world. And it's time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream when we get to talk to all of y'all. But it's going to be an incredibly fun one, folks, because we get to talk about quite literally anything and everything that y'all want to talk about, and we find that to be quite enjoyable. It's an incredibly fun thing. Who in the world could disagree? We can talk about anything, except for religion, politics, and the third one, climate change. We actually didn't think that that would ever be included. y'all thought, but we are not touching that again. But nevertheless, it is time for us to get on into these questions. But before we do, I do understand, Matthew, that many people have been talking about this very pressing issue or situation with the economic fortitude or situation with the Republic of India and America's trade position with the Republic of India on the global stage, and where they'll be going here in the near future after the implementation of a 25% tariff by the President of the United States earlier today. So what are people thinking about that, Matthew? What are you thinking about that as well?
All right. And I do want to clarify one thing real quick. There was already a 25% tariff on this situation with India, and this is an extra 25% on top of that. So it's bringing the total tariff to 50% on India imposed by the United States. And what do you think is going to happen as a result of this new change? About 39% said India will negotiate with the USA, while 29% said India will become aggressive and start taking action against the US, and 24% said nothing will happen. And I believe, based on the statement that India put out yesterday, they said that they were going to hold their ground, they weren't going to negotiate, and that if the U.S. keeps pushing them, then they will take action to protect their economy. So it sounds like Modi is not taking very kindly to these tariffs whatsoever, and he's also making a point to go visit China right now, literally right this second. So I would say that India probably will try to remain neutral for a bit, but they might end up responding and becoming aggressive if they feel like this is really going to hurt their economy, which it could. So I'm actually with the 29%. I think they're going to be more inclined to get aggressive to try to combat this instead of negotiating based on their statement. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have a feeling that India will mostly become more aggressive, pretty much for those same reasons, because at the end of the day, the Indians do have some minor options, although I don't really understand why they would try and side with the Chinese, considering the Chinese kind of hate them. They might try and do that nonetheless. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really a big fan of the Republic of India as a country, because just to make it a little bit clear, it's not really like the Pakistanis are a better option, but Modi's government is hyper-nationalist, like to the point that it could almost be described as some sort of like a Indian fascist type of a government, like the best way to explain it. Like they're hyper nationalist to the point that literally any actions that must be taken, as long as the ends justify the means, they will be taken to position India into a better position. So while it would be fine to say they'll probably try and negotiate, at the same time, though, considering the kind of mindset that the Modi government has, I would kind of doubt it. So I think they might actually end up doing something stupid and shooting themselves in the foot, and also probably trying to screw us over in the process at this point, because now they're probably going to be looking at us as someone who's trying to threaten Indian sovereignty or some sort of a silly notion like that, and we're simply just trying to make sure that we end up fixing the situation in Eastern Europe right now for the larger part, or at least pressure the Russians to end the war on amicable terms. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is time for us to move on to those questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping right into our Super Chat segment, our final one of the night. We'll get our Super Chats first, then our live chats on the Morse code decoders. But our first Super Chat here goes to LC39A, a channel legend and also massive supporter of the channel, by the way. He puts in a 114 Canadian, and thank you very much, good sir, for that Canadian support, and we do appreciate that very much. He said, I'm amazed at how Zelenskyy has grown from a comedian to a statesman.
Now, really, honestly, I am as well. It's a crazy thing to see. It's because he was a comedian that then got elected, which is a little bit of a crazy thing in itself, that he really didn't have a political background before he was elected as president of Ukraine, which seems to be kind of a running theme these days, is that you really don't have to have a political background to get elected in the highest offices of any national government these days anywhere. But beyond that, and then ended up doing pretty okay as the president of Ukraine, and then he turned into a wartime president, which is a pretty shocking thing as well, considering that he has almost no governmental experience. He literally went from the pan straight into the fire, pretty much, for the larger part. So I've got to say, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like ULC39A, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And I do have to say that he's a pretty impressive statesman, all things considered, and also considering his larger lack of experience. But with that,
Honestly, though, he really did have some experience because, like Ms. Disa pointed out, Zelenskyy was a businessman. He ran his own production company, and that's largely how he amassed most of his wealth, was through that production company. He was also a comedian, but he also went to law school as well. while. I don't think he became an actual attorney, but he did get the law degree. So he's got a pretty credentialed background, actually. So even though a lot of people saw him, obviously doing the piano tricks and things like that, and people have used that as propaganda to say, this guy's an idiot, he's actually got a really strong education. And also he's got a strong background in business too. So no, he's very competent. I think a lot of people will take, like, for example, when people are funny, like even when we get funny, they think, oh, they're just being stupid, they're being funny and stuff like that. People hear comedy and so that turns a lot of people off sometimes, and they think, oh, he must be stupid. But like Zelensky's a perfect example to the contrary.
I would honestly, though, man, like anytime anyone tries to get silly, people try and use it as ammunition later. Is the truth. But the thing about that though, it's a little bit stupid when people do that kind of stuff because it's like, doesn't everyone do that? Like, aren't the people even criticizing him for doing that do that as well? Like they dress up weird for Halloween, or they do a goofy joke or something like that, or they say something cringe. It's like, doesn't everyone do that? It's like, also that's a little bit goofy because a lot of people who say that about Zelenskyy, I mean, there's a lot of people, who may or may not be. Many signals have been said. Many people have said many things. And of course, a lot of people love to say a lot of things as they have a right to do, or maybe not to do sometimes, depending on the jurisdiction on the specific item or statement that they're saying. But nevertheless, there are a lot of people in America in positions of government that may or may not have made videos in the past that could be incredibly weird. Like, for example, one where there was this guy and he was dressed up in a dress and they were sniffing perfume off of each other. Maybe something like that happened. Some signals were given. Some signals weren't given. Some people may have found it funny. Some people may have not found it funny, but nevertheless, people do that sort of thing all the time. Or maybe some people don't. It's really up to their preference, but it's something that is important to remember and discuss about from time to time, and to understand what positions we're coming from, and to really understand and synergize with them, to understand where we're going from here. But I hope that all of y'all through the political bullshit got what I'm saying.
Senator, please, Mr. Senator, calm down. You're going crazy, Mr. Senator.
Honestly, folks, I think I ought to be nominated for the Secretary of Defense because I think I could do a pretty good job in front of Congress. They'd be like, how many submarines are in the U.S. Navy? I'd be like, well, I can or cannot say how many submarines are in the U.S. Navy. Now, submarines are incredibly important, or may not be incredibly important, depending on the mission that you're trying to conduct, but it has a wide variety of tools inside of its toolkit in a figurative sense to be able to conduct its missions that it needs. But that's only if the United States government would like for them to conduct those sorts of missions. Otherwise, they may just be inside a port, or something like just do that for like 5 minutes.
You got the wrong job position for that. The Secretary of State has to be belligerent. That's got to be their strong suit. If you want to do the circular stuff, you got to be a senator or a rep. That's where you go for that. You don't become the defense secretary. Also, I guess you could say the Secretary of State, that requires some circle talk, to say the least. So yeah, I think it depends on who's in charge. Whoever's at the top, that sort of dictates how much of a circular talk the underlings have to do. Do they have to just ramble? Do they actually get to talk freely, or what?
I like how though over the past few years, anyone who's ever put in a position of a secretary of anything in the executive branch, every time they're brought in front of Congress, basically the answers are like this. So, what about this part of your job? Kiss my ass. Okay, what about this other part? Kiss my ass. It's like that. It's literally like they're not even giving answers hardly. They're just like trying to fight whoever's asking the question. It's like this isn't really doing anything for anyone. Honestly, folks,
they tried to teach them a lesson on a couple of them. They held one or two individuals in contempt of Congress, which hasn't been done, I think, in a super long time. It really didn't teach anybody a lesson after that happened. Like everybody still came in there and was still being belligerent, no matter who they were subpoenaing to Congress.
Honestly, I feel like there needs to be some lessons taught on that because it's like this is a congressional inquiry or a congressional hearing. You don't have a right to act like a jackass. This may as well be a normal court proceeding as far as anyone's concerned. And in fact, this may as well be one of the largest ones as far as anyone's concerned because it's in front of the Congress. That's like this isn't just, your normal municipal court where you're being brought in for public intoxication or something. This is the Congress trying to get down to vital answers that pertain to the nation itself.
You remember the guy who was like, well, stand your butt up then, and we'll just handle it like men. And other guys like, yeah, stand your butt up then. And they're like about to get into a fist fight in the middle of Congress. You remember that one?
Yeah, I remember that one. You would think that at that point, if someone threatened, well, stand up, and I would say, wait, you're asking me to do that as a senator of the United States? Have you lost your damn mind?
It was the senator. But based on what I saw, it sounded like the senator said that to the witness, which was the union chief. He told him, like, you had said something on Twitter. So, like, do you want to handle it here like men or something? So then the union chief was like, well, stand your butt up. And then the other guy started repeating it back to him.
Oh,
and then, of course, the chairman said, oh, wait a minute, settle down. You know what I'm talking talking about, right? The guy who was the chairman of that hearing.
I think I do. I think give me another
The
tip
top
who he is.
1% of this
Oh,
insanity is
oh,
caused by the
him.
union chief.
Oh my God! Wait a minute, he was the speaker during that.
No, he was the chairman of the
Oh,
hearing. It was a senator that was getting into it with the union boss, who was the witness, and it went out of control.
What the hell was the hearing even about? Like now I'm like actually interested in this.
It was the Teamsters guy, the Teamsters union leader. So it was I think it was about unions.
Oh, okay. So okay. Now I know what it generally would have been about. Because there's only a couple of things, folks, that a union boss is going to come in front of the Congress for, and it usually is some sort of a labor issue. Well, it's always a labor issue, but they can take some different forms, but seldom are they anything major in difference in forms. Usually some sort of a labor issue. But anyways, that is absolutely crazy. Also, it's absolutely crazy how personal people take things in government now. Like, you can sit there and say this senator is full of shit, and they take it personally. It's like, you're a senator, you're a public figure. You know, it's like you're going to get crapped on. That's just a part of the job.
Honestly, if I was chairing that committee, I would have been like, okay, the senator just or one of them challenged each other to a fist fight. The other guy said, "Yeah, I'll fist fight you." I'd have been like, "Oh, well, that sounds like mutual combat to me." Well, here's the center of the room. We'll pause the hearing and let them do what they got to do. I'd have been like, if y'all are stupid enough to start doing that, then go right ahead. If you want to make an idiot out of yourself, go right ahead.
Honestly, that if a senator did that, that is a very unprofessional decorum. That should have been punished, like, quite severely. But if it was the union boss that did it, then he needs to be held in contempt of Congress. That whole thing is insane, though. To think that that's actually happening these days. I mean, this kind of stuff, back when it happened, like when people would do these sorts of stupid things, this would make, like, national history forever. Like Bloody Sumner, when that guy got beat in the actual, I think it was the Senate chamber back before the Civil War. Like, that's been in the history books forever. Like, that was the thing that happened. It was crazy, and it never happened again. But this kind of stuff happens so often these days, it doesn't even really reach the headliners anymore.
Yeah, it really doesn't, honestly. It's just honestly crazy. Like I'm a big believer in decorum. Like even back in the day, like, and people really jumped on me for this. I still said that Zelenskyy should wear a suit, and people will still jump me for that today. I'm sure I'm about to see in the live chat. I just believe decorum is something that's important because it sets the tone for all like the future dealings. And like for example, Congress, in official settings, it tells people there are standards here, and the suit and your attire like is the like foundation of those standards. It reminds people that this is a serious body that you've walked into. It's not just some like random place on the side of the street. And it kind of sets the tone a little bit.
Yeah, and it's not like, okay, wake up, prisoner, you're going in front of the judge because you're drunk yesterday. It's not that kind of a deal. This is the U.S. Congress representing the whole country. Have a little bit of decorum to wear a suit, or have a little bit of decorum to treat it as seriously as it is. Like that's something, folks, that I feel like is causing a lot more issues than a lot of people would like to admit, is this whole breakdown of tradition and decorum that happens inside of these age-old institutions that we have. It's a ridiculous sort of a thing these days, because nobody gives respect to judges anymore. Like, a judge can't just screw your ass over and hold you in contempt of court. Like, no one even thinks about that anymore. Everyone acts like they got a right to mouth off to the judge. Everyone's got a right to mouth off to the Congress. The senators and representatives have a right to mouth off to everyone else. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's unprofessional behavior. And it should be dealt with. We should start to lay out the groundwork to say this isn't going to be happening any longer. Because if people think they're going to sit around and act like this is just some sort of a fight on the corner of a street, they're going to start learning different. Both the senators, the representatives, the people coming in here running their mouths, the people in the executive branch, this stuff isn't going to be happening much longer. It's too much lenience on that side of things that's being given these days, and it's letting people think that they can push the envelope to the point that the system itself is about to fall apart, because now it's not just the lack of decorum, it's now the lack of following through with the actual procedures themselves, because the lack of decorum ceases to exist at all. It's a really...
and also showing up, and this is just a personal quirk with me. Here's my thing. Just because somebody wears a suit doesn't mean that person is like a real professional, or they're like all put together or something. That's just like a good foundation to set the tone. There's a lot of people that wear suits that are complete like fools and idiots. Like, that doesn't make somebody smart, but at least that sets a good foundation, at least in my opinion, for decorum. But like the people that want to wander into, like, for example, if you try to wander into a courtroom and you're wearing like like shorts or something, most judges are going to put you through the ringer over that. At least in Alabama, they will. I'm not sure if that's the same thing everywhere else, but they'll put you through the ringer because you're not in dress code for the court and you're showing disrespect to the court. Sort of the same thing with that. But like the people that want to show up to like Congress, which is like obviously in the main building where the legislature is, they want to show up and wear like Carhartt hoodies and stuff. I'm like, Carhartt hoodie, to me, it comes across as disrespectful. Like, if anybody did that, it seems a bit disrespectful to walk into, like, the biggest body of legislature in the country and not to show a basic respect like that.
And also another thing that I gotta say, this is something that's annoying me these days. And then the people who wear suits then act like the suit's a joke. So they wear like the little ducky tie, or they wear the silly socks, or they wear like sneakers.
Man, you hating on those ducky ties, man?
Yeah, man, it's so dumb. It's like you're going to go through all this effort to dress professionally, and then you're going to end up ruining it with a silly thing. Like I know that a lot of people like to treat everything like it's a joke these days, but some stuff shouldn't be treated like a joke. Like when you're actually in a formal professional setting to where you have to wear a suit, you shouldn't be treating it like a joke by wearing a ducky tie or silly socks or sneakers. That just ends up defeating the whole professional atmosphere you're trying to convey with what you're wearing. Like I just don't get that kind of stuff. And I know that a lot of people want to treat things like it's relaxed and it's not too serious, but as far as I'm concerned, folks, in my personal opinion, there is nothing more serious than governance, because that affects 360 million people today, whatever you do, and that is a very serious sort of a thing. You should be dressed and act and perform with the mindset that 360 million people are going to be affected by whatever decisions and whatever words you make or come out of your mouth. That should be something that is understood with how you even dress. It should convey that kind of seriousness. That goes for governors, that goes for senators, that goes for representatives, that goes for folks in the state legislators, that goes for county commissioners. Everyone should have the kind of respect that my decisions in this government, whether it be the state or federal level, will affect people. And I ought to make sure that I dress and act accordingly to show that there is some aura of seriousness that I'm putting into this to show them that this isn't some kind of a joke. This is something that is serious. I would say that should be the understanding.
Also, by the way, I just got to ask this question. How come every time I mention like going into a court or something, everybody immediately starts assuming I was in there on charges or something? Like, why is that? Like, in the chat, I was seeing like a couple of things, people saying, well, stay out of court, kids. I wasn't in there like on charges or something, by the way. Like, I was actually a paralegal for a while, so that's why I was in court. So I don't know why. Even when I went to court, like as a paralegal, I would literally sit down, like, because I was obviously there being a paralegal for an attorney. I would sit down, and sometimes the court clerk would walk in and say, they would literally point at me and say, "Are we waiting on the young man's father?" I'd be like, "I'm a paralegal, lady." It's like, I'm not here like on charges or something. It's like, what the hell's up with that?
Man, I gotta say, I hardly ever went into the court. And of course, whenever I go in, for some reason, man, everyone always thinks that I'm older than I am. One time, folks, I went into an airport here in Birmingham. Actually, I'll tell you all the story. It was so funny. I went into the Birmingham International Airport because I was looking for the flight school, which happens to be over here. Somewhere over here. But anyways, I was looking for the flight school, and for some reason on Google, it showed that it was in the international airport. I was like, okay, that's a little bit weird, but I'll go into the international airport. So I went in there and I said, hi, yes, I was looking for the flight school here at this airport. And the person there said, oh, I'm very sorry, sir. I'll go and get someone right away. They brought down the director of the entire airport from, I guess, the air traffic control tower or something. I don't even know where he was, but he came walking out. Oh, hello, sir. Are you a recruiter for Delta? And I was like, no. I was like, I'm just looking for the flight school. I was looking to get flight lessons. Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. You looked like you were the recruiter for Delta Airlines. We were actually expecting him today. I thought he was you. But yeah, if you're looking for the flight school, it's on the other side of the airport. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I left. I was dressed in a suit during that time. I had just gotten out of college and doing a whole presentation and everything for a class. So I was dressed in a suit. But I absolutely got a kick out of that because I was like, no way in hell I looked like a recruiter. I mean, like, and to go get the director at the damn airport, I was like, this is just absolutely top-notch silliness right here.
You should have played along, been like, can y'all like drive me in the golf cart over there to the flight school? I need to inspect the flight school real quick. I just need a little ride over there, that's all.
Man, honestly, that would have been absolutely ridiculous. That would have been crazy if I actually had done that. And then I was like, oh, by the way, I'm not even the instructor. I just, want you to drive me over here. That would have been absolutely insane. Like, I
And you
couldn't
could have
have
been
done
in
that.
court, and they could have been like, "Are we waiting on his mother?"
No, dude, they would have sat there and said, "Excuse me, sir, who are you representing today?" I'd be like, "I'm the one here for this." They'd be like, "Oh, okay." Like, honestly, that was absolutely serious. But also, Alarm Goose said, "You must look serious for your age." I don't know. Like some people think I don't. Some people think I do. I think it really just depends on who you run into. But apparently, when I walked into that airport, I looked like a recruiter for an airline. And I was like, that is certainly not it. Like, I am not a recruiter for an airline, because at that time, folks, I was like 19 or 20. I was not that old at all. Like, I'm still not even old, but I was definitely not old then. And so that was just absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, I was about to bust out laughing in front of the director, and I was like, oh, I don't want to make him feel stupid because he came out here, and I don't want to make this woman this lady feel stupid because she went and got the guy because she thought I was a recruiter. I didn't want them to think that at all. So I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. I didn't mean to, bother you. I was just looking, and they were like, oh yeah, no problem. But I could tell that the lady was heavily embarrassed that she went and found the director. Was like, hey, the recruiter's here. I was like, oh my god. I was like, this is terrible. But anyways, I hope that was a funny story for y'all to hear. I always get a kick out of thinking about that one, because I actually tell that story from time to time off air still, because I'm like, that was crazy and hilarious. And then I went to the flight school, and then they told me pretty much I'm a cripple and I can't really do anything. So like, okay, I was like, that's fine. And just to tell y'all folks, I have double major scoliosis. It's something like I think at the greatest, it's like a 28-degree curvature in my spine, one direction, and then it goes back the other, and then it straightens out at the top. But for some reason, it's like 1 degree over the maximum. So everyone treats me like I'm crippled. Like they're like, oh, you can't really get like even like a recreational pilot's license. You can't join the military. This is literally just that 1 extra degree over. Not waiverable, nothing. It's just like, why? It's like, why is that
Well,
the case?
you're not really crippled. You're crooked.
Yeah, I'm crooked. That's why I'm going into politics, folks. Like
Yeah,
if
you'd
you
be a
vote for
perfect
me, like,
politician. If somebody calls you crooked, it's be like, "Are you making fun of my medical condition?"
are you able to?
Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you're making fun of my medical condition, aren't you? Yeah.
And, man, that's what I do. When people sit there and just go, "You're crooked," go, just like my spine, like, something like that, maybe. But let's see. Alarm Goose said, "Painful? No, it's not painful. It doesn't hurt at all. Actually, that's the thing that like gets me annoyed about that whole thing. It's like, I'm not crippled. It's like, it's a little crooked, sure, but it doesn't hurt, and also it doesn't cause me any issues. So why in the world is everyone treating me like I'm crippled? I walk fine. I can run. I can walk. I can talk. I can do everything that everyone else does, literally. But for some reason, they want to treat you like a cripple when your spine's a little crooked and shaped like a pretzel. Like, it's like, that's just silly, honestly. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Let's see. Miss Decent said, "Better than being spineless." Honestly,
That's
that's
right.
true. You could be a protoplasmic invertebrate jelly, as the fellow over there in the UK called it. That's also a bad thing too.
Yeah, that's true. I saw a plant lord say it'll hurt you later in life. Yeah, I've heard that it will start to hurt a lot later in life, but there really isn't much to be done about it. It's just kind of an issue that I got to live with. But for now, it doesn't hurt at all, and never has. And so I'm always like, why the hell won't anyone take me to do stuff? Because I want to do stuff. Like, I wanted back in the day, I was actually looking at trying to slowly get like a recreational pilot's license. Not that I could ever buy a plane, like, they're insanely expensive, even a Cessna's like a couple of $100,000, but I just wanted to have one to be like, I got one. That's what I was wanting to do. Couldn't do that. And then I wanted to go join the military. Like, that was the big thing I actually wanted to do, folks, back when I was in high school. I wanted to get into the Army and commission as an officer. Couldn't do that. Like, I went up to recruiters. I was like, so how about this? Like, I got this curvature thing in the spine. Can I get in the military? And y'all know what the famous saying is. Oh, you can get a waiver for that. They love to say that. The Army recruiter was like, yeah, let me go and get an answer. They never got back with me. And then I had to walk up to them. I was like, hey, did you give me an answer? And they looked at me. And this is when you can tell that you don't have that recruitable aura around you, is when they look at you like you're trash because they can't meet a quota off of you because you can't be recruited. And they look at you and go, yeah, you can't join. And I was like, not even with a wait? Nope. And I was like, what? I was like, no way. I was like, I just got screwed out of getting in the service. It's like, and the only reason why is because it was noticed that I leaned in pictures. If I had never gone and had that figured out, nobody caught that in my scoliosis screening. I could have gotten in the military probably.
No,
Like
they'd have found it. They'd have found it at MEPS.
maybe not, man, because like if they do like the hand down your back thing, nobody ever found it doing that at school, like through all the scoliosis screens. Everyone's like, yeah, but he's perfect. Like even with the curvature I had, and so they wouldn't have found that then either. I could have gotten in and not known about it my whole life if we hadn't
Now
gone
that
and gotten those damn X-rays.
if you'd have gone through like the duck walk, you'd probably had a hard time doing that or something.
Nah, man, I would have done it. Lickety split, man, honestly. And I wouldn't have known about it until I was like maybe 50 or 60 or something. And then they'd be like, hey, your spine's crooked. And I'd be like, oh, well, what do you know? My spine's crooked. Should have become a politician. Oh, man, I'm telling you. But anyway, so that it is time for us to get on into some more questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our next super chat goes to, and also by the way, huge shout out to LC39A for that support once again. And our next one goes to Little by Little, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much as well for that support, by the way. A channel legend who said, I went through my records. My first watch of the channel was day 3 of the war. I subbed at the 5,000 mark, and congrats on the success. And take one from the chat.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, really cool to hear that you've been around that long. You are definitely an old guard, even by traditional metrics, because old guards were supposed to be folks who joined before day 4, but then the revised metrics actually said that you could have joined within the first month in your old guard. So you're old guard by every metric. And I've got to say, a huge thanks to you for the support. And I gotta say, thank you for congratulating us on the success of the channel. It's really come a long ways, and we're actually really close to hitting 483,000 subscribers right now, literally just a couple of dozen away from that. And I gotta thank you incredibly for enjoying this channel and supporting it and helping it to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing running. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the one from the chat, sponsored by Little, is going to go to Elka Sir, who said, did you know that Anduril was named after said sword from Lord of the Rings? Did you know? I actually did know that. A lot of the modern defense companies are actually named after either TV shows or they're named after Greek mythology of some sort or another. Another example is Palantir. That's named after, I believe, Greek mythology, I think, or maybe from Lord of the Rings. I think it is Lord of the Rings, actually. I'm not super familiar with the show, but I've heard it's named after things from that show, which is a little bit interesting that they chose to name it that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to open up an arms company. I'm going to call it OP after the kid of Andy Griffith in the Andy Griffith show. They're gonna be like, OP Arms. Like, bro, OP is wiping out the Houthis. That's what they're gonna say, and it's gonna be a great day. But beyond that, I gotta thank you for sharing that. That's actually an interesting fact to hear. Pretty neat, actually. Matthew was actually talking to me about that before the show. He was talking about, you know, how stuff's named like the weirdest of things, and it ends up being well known these days. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of crazy, like Anduril. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and sponsoring that live chat little by little, and I hope that we addressed that quite well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, does anybody even know what Palantir does? Like, that's the most common thing I see people asking. I see people mentioning Palantir is a Lord of the Rings reference. Palantir is like the most like nondescript company I've ever seen in my life. I've learned what they do, but it took like a long time to figure it out. Basically, they just come up with AI like dashboards for different types of defense like situations, and they also, I believe, they work with the government in like. I think it might be actually surveillance in another form or another on different things like domestically. I'm not really sure about that though. But it's like the most nondescript company ever, which tells you they must be in a hell of a lot of classified stuff because otherwise they'd be telling you what they did. But have you seen them enforce it, like their company as a whole?
I haven't really, but you know something, Matthew, that's actually really crazy is that the largest glitter manufacturer in America was asked one time during a press tour of their factory. They were like, "Who's the biggest customer of your glitter company?" And they actually said, "Oh, we can't answer that." Because it's actually classified. And it turns out that the military was actually buying up huge amounts of their glitter used in apparently things like chaff or whatnot.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I was actually interested to know that too because I was like, what? Oh, yeah. I was like, what the hell? So yeah, it actually turned out that was what it was apparently being used for. It was being used by the military.
Oh, that's interesting. Also, by the way, I see a lot of people in the chat, like, Palantir has a lot of controversy around it. Like, that really can't be ignored, really. It's got a lot of controversy because I believe they've signed a contract with the government to do something related to surveillance. And a lot of people were put off by it. So, I mean, I get it. I'm not a huge fan of like domestic government surveillance. They, of course, have to do it because there's domestic terrorists now in the United States that have to be kept under watch. But at the same time, though, it's not good because it erodes everybody else's rights. That's a honest, citizen. So that's a downside of it.
I'd say so for sure. And so with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one, Palantir. But what do we got for the next one, Matthew? What do we got?
And our next super chat goes to Deminoac, who puts in a 33. And thank you very much, Deminoac, as well for that support. They said, do you believe the USA has had enough of Russia?
I would have to largely say yes. I think we're running out of patience. I would hope so, at least. Because if for some reason we do not follow through with this August 8th deadline, which I can't say that we we'll definitely follow through with it because you just never know. As they always say in the current administration, the president has the right to choose. You're pretty much privileged as a voter in the citizen of this republic to actually know what your elected representative at the highest level of the executive branch is actually going to do or decide to do. So just want to make that a little bit clear. You could just back out. So with that in mind, I would have to say, hopefully we've had enough of the Russians, because if they somehow pull this little wool over our eyes again, like they're trying to do right now, and we fall for it, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to be very unhappy about that. That's going to be one of the weakest things that I've seen. It's weaker than doing nothing at that point, because now we're doing something, and it's the weakest thing that can be done. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Deminoac, and I hope that answered your question incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Deminoac once again, who puts in a 33. And they said it might be the USA asked Israel to help out Lebanon. Maybe that's why they're attacking.
Maybe. I would doubt it, though, because the Lebanese government doesn't really like Israel all too much. So them teaming up to deal with the Hezbollah, I'd find it mostly unlikely. The Israelis are probably just doing what they do. And sometimes that doesn't really require anyone to be on board. They just kind of do what they want. So I hope that addresses that well the best I can, at least in my opinion. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Once again, Deminoac, because that's actually your second support of the night. We massively thank you for that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a 30. And thank you very much, Marion, as well for that support. And Marion said, we need you. Never leave us. And thanks.
Hey, thank you so much for the kind words. We will never leave y'all. We will never. We will keep this show running until the wheels fall off of it. Because at this point, we've turned into a world news channel, so even if the war in Ukraine ends, we still have a lot to cover. There's a lot going on in the world every day beyond that. So we would still be able to keep shows and videos running like clockwork like we do right now. So a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, I see people talking about some of these defense CEOs. I'll be honest with you, most of the defense CEOs, like especially these new companies, I'm not trying to like personally attack them or something like that, but like Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, I believe is like the leader of Palantir. They're very odd individuals, the way they act. I'm not sure if they're just maybe awkward or maybe they perhaps are nefarious and they're trying to like put on a mask or something, but they do come across a little bit weird. I will admit that. The only cool one that I've really seen is Palmer Luckey, who runs Anduril, is he actually started off not in defense. He started off with Oculus, which is like a gaming headset that people use to game on Xbox and PC and things like that. So the other ones are a little bit strange, I will admit. Kind of like not. I'm not sure if they're quite as strange as Mark Zuckerberg. Like Mark Zuckerberg's on a different level. I think he's on definitely a different level. But they're sort of like in the middle ground between the normal CEOs and the Mark Zuckerberg type. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat. This one goes to Uncle David Other Nephew, a channel legend, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, "Take one from the chat and nice work."
And thank you so much for the support, Uncle David Other Nephew. And we will make sure to take one from the chat. And thank you for enjoying our nice work. We try our best, and I hope that tonight was a great success. That rhymes, and I like to say it. But nevertheless, what we got for a live chat, Matthew, in honor of Uncle David Other Nephew?
And this one is going to go to Charm, who said Indian government just stated that they will continue to purchase Russian oil despite the sanctions. Same with China, so now what?
Well, we start sanctioning them in violation of the sanctions. So we just start to build up the pressure on all of the involved parties until they start to back out and the Russians are left on their own, or we keep the pressure going to make them suffer as well. That's generally the only approach we can take at this point. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and a big shout out to Uncle David, other nephew, for sponsoring our live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Sparky107107, and a huge shout out to Sparky for that $20 support as well. He said, I think Putin knows he is lost, so make the USA do the sanctions, blame the West, and the start of World War III, basically. And Putin knows he lost, so take the world into the World War and then blame everybody else, basically.
Possibly, but really the truth is that we have no choice. Because if we're trying to end the war, we pretty much have to go forward with the actions that we'll be taking today. Because in the end, if we do this, World War III starts, and if we do nothing, the Russians might attack NATO, and then World War III starts as well. So we kind of get the same result, no matter what we're doing at this point. So that might be the case, but if it happens, it generally happens. Not to say a non-statement, but that's pretty much the position we're in right now. So a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
And our next one goes to Matthew Schmidt, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Matthew, for that support from another Matthew. He said, best world news, guys, and I appreciate it immensely.
Schmidt, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. I thank you for appreciating it. And we try our best. We try our best. We really do. I say that to everyone who says that we do great. I think we do okay. I think that there's always room for improvement. Give us a 4-star on Yelp, folks. There's always room for improvement. But I do thank you so much for the kind words, because we try our best, and I love to know that people find this channel to be their primary source of news like you are. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Gray Grimley, who puts in a 20. They said, insert generic compliment. Oh, thank you for that. You guys are great. And also, LSA. Insert generic words of encouragement. Go, guys.
Hey.
Do better. LSA. Take a question from the chat. And love what you guys do. Keep it up, guys, and long live the LSA.
LSA. And I thank you so much for the support, Greg Grimley. And throw again generic words of support, because generic words of support are always greatly appreciated here on this channel. But I gotta massively thank you so much for that, because folks like you who throw in generic words of encouragement help us to keep this generic kind of news coverage going. The kind that makes you say corporate things like synergize and community and those sorts of words in roundabout circles. You know what, folks? Let me go, and actually that'd take too much time to write up that prompt, but beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and the kind words. Now, we will make sure to get a generic live chat for your generic kind words and your generic requests for a live chat, because we always want to make sure that this channel is as generic and bland and boring as it can possibly be. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I get no respect around here. So, Matthew, what do we got for a live chat?
And the live chat question goes to Private Public, who said, will the Baltics defense line being constructed hold better than the French Maginot line?
Defensive lines generally don't hold. No matter how much people would like them to be impenetrable, they generally just slow down the enemy. They're not indestructible and impenetrable, though. So as far as the defensive line in the Baltics, it will slow the Russians, but it won't stop them. So it'll buy time for everyone to be able to respond and then try and set up some sort of a counterattack, or to be able to try and wipe out the Russian attack force before it can make it through, or break through a large amount of areas. So I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you, though, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep this thing running. And I see a lot of people saying, no, this channel isn't generic, it's way above generic. Listen, folks, we are the great value brand of news out here, all right? We don't sit there and we don't get into that whole customized, Republican to Democrat sort of thing. That's the brand name stuff. We're just generic, Or like that great value Dr. Pibb or something like that, We're perfectly fine with that. We're as American as apple pie. Matthew, please, come up with something corporate to say to all the folks out here out at home.
We sincerely appreciate the synergy that everyone has brought to this meeting tonight. We hope that you join us for the future of this grand vision for this wonderful corporation that the stock market, of course, loves to see more shares purchased, and America.
I would like to say that we thank you all so much in our community for synergizing with us and our company's mission. It's always an incredible thing to know that we are able to work with our amazing shareholders to originally envision the dream that our first founder had, to be able to help out people in the best ways possible, to be able to make sure to reach out to them through the selling of these groceries, or the conveying of the news like we do here on this channel, to be able to try and make this world a little bit of a better place. We always like to
Wait a
think
second, John. I'll take it from here. Here at this company, we're really all about the people here. We're all about family. And family is what makes Enforcer Media the place that many people want to be. Because, of course, this is the place where people work.
we're a people company, and we're all about people. It's like a family here. It's like a big
Man,
family
we're running our
community.
viewers off with this junk, man. We're running them all. Come back.
Come back, everyone. We're just kidding. We're just kidding. We're not like that. We're really not like that. I promise y'all. We're not corporate or anything. But I do have to say, Matthew, that please reach out to me about any issues that you have in the company at any time. All right, well, that's it. I clocked out. Screw you. That's the real corporate treatment. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support. And well, actually, did we get the live chat for Greg Grimley, Matthew?
I believe we did.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Okay, good. Hopefully we did. But a big thanks to Greg Grimley once again for the support and helping this channel keep it running. And I hope that does address that incredibly well. Y'all actually wouldn't believe it. There's like a usual kind of like a slow burning decay of viewership that happens in the question segment. We started that, and there's like a tiny little extra divot of like a decrease in viewership because of that. Corporate speak actually makes people run away. Like it's actually a thing. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Pooker1228, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Pooker, as well, for that support. They said, keep up the good work, and you guys are my main news source. Glad the channel's growing, and no question, and take the next one.
You know, that's actually something that a lot of people are saying these days, Pooker. A lot of people are like, wow, congratulations on success. Y'all are growing. And a lot of people are saying that the closer we get to 500,000 subscribers. But it also is mental, like, to be entirely honest with y'all, to think that we're actually about to reach 500,000. Because I remember when years ago in September. Wait a minute. Okay, so September's coming up soon. In September of 2021, I founded this channel, and on its first day, it got 13 subscribers, and most of those were friends and family. Like, I think only 4 of them were actually real people. Like, you know, people that weren't friends and family that subscribed. So it was crazy to see. Also, one of those subscribers was actually another account of mine that I had, and then I subscribed. So, you know, like, it was, you know, that's how it worked. But beyond that, also, by the way, just to explain that, that's my personal account that I subscribed to on this. This was supposed to be like a plan to try and turn this thing into a news channel from the start. But so I subscribe with my personal account to my business account, which is a little bit silly. But beyond that, it's still subscribed, actually. But beyond that, I will say, it's absolutely crazy to see that we're getting up towards 500,000 subscribers, because that was 4 years ago almost that this channel was actually turned on for the first time ever on YouTube. And 4 years later, we're about to hit 500,000 subscribers. And it's so crazy to think about that, because I remember when we started at 13. Actually, it wasn't even we. It was just me at that point. We started at 13. Matthew joined on around 40,000 subscribers. And since then, it's gotten up to almost 500,000. And it's just nuts to think about how all that's gone, how much time has passed, and how many things we've done, and how many things the community, like the Lee Spring Army, has done as well. It's really a crazy thing. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, and congratulating us for the success, because it has been a long time coming to even get close to hitting 500,000. And I'll be honest with y'all, I actually never thought we'd see the day where we'd hit 500,000. I thought that was something that was off in the way distant future. It would never happen for us. We probably, you know, like even out at 300 or maybe 400 if we were lucky. And now we're here all the way almost at 500,000. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we will move on to the next one.
All right, and our next support here is going to go to Dark Sheep, who just threw in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Dark Sheep, for that support as well. He said, what are the chances, in y'all's opinion, that China will do a quick 180 at the cusp of Russia falling and turn on them and invade Russia, and all the CEOs are awkward nerds with no social skills and can't pull women? Damn. That's brutal right there. I will say, generally speaking, I don't really make fun of awkward people. Like if that's like your personality, I think it's better just to be awkward than to try to like put on this face like you're not. Like this whole Mark Zuckerberg rebranding thing, like he's a frat guy or something like that. I'm like, it's totally fake. It's like, that's not the guy. It's like, obviously it's not him. But yeah, he's trying to act like it. So, just be yourself. And honestly, if you are awkward, there's a certain level of money you can reach. Like, for example, a few million, and then all of a sudden the social skills don't matter anymore beyond that point when it comes to pulling women. So, that's kind of a benefit to being a successful tech CEO. But to answer the main question, though, I don't think China's ever going to turn on Russia and try to invade them like that, at least in our lifetime. Probably not. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I don't think the Chinese will ever invade Russia as well. The chances of that are literally zero almost. But as far as the CEOs being awkward, I wouldn't really diss them for it. Like to each their own. If they're making it, they're making it. Good on them, I suppose. But I don't generally like to try and pick on people for being overly social or overly awkward because everyone has to survive in their own skin. And if that's who they are, that's just what they have to live with. Like, I'm a very extroverted kind of a person. A lot of people could be like, damn, he tries. Like in real life, I try a lot to try and make sure that people have a little bit of a laugh here and there, to try and crack a joke, to make them laugh, or to try and be relatable to people and understand them. And some people might end up dissing on me for that. But that's just who I am. Like, I can't really change it. It's just what I was born to do. Like, a lot of people are born to also be, socially awkward. Like, it's just the case for some people. And I don't ever want to diss on them for that because I can't really control who I am, like as far as how I socially behave, and other people can't either. So I do thank you for the support though. And I would have to say that there are some critiques that I would have on, billionaires, CEOs, such things. But it wouldn't really have to do much with their personality. It'd have to do with more of how they interact with the world itself. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to John Taco, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, John Taco, for that support. He said, let's have a taco party.
I thank you for the support, and we'll have to consider that. We'll put that under advisement. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Cameron, who puts in a 10. He said, hey there, and thanks for the news, and keep up the good work in LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, Cameron. And thank you for enjoying our work and wanting to help us to keep it up. And so we will. Long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Dark Sheep once again. And thank you very much, Dark Sheep, for that support. He said, I don't want to pick on people either. I'm awkward. I'm introverted. And facts are still facts, and they're still awkward. Be gentle with them and me. Now, I will say that, Dark Sheep. Me personally, I'm an introverted person. I'm not an outgoing person. If anybody ever meets me in real life, they'll pick up on that pretty quick. I don't go around talking to people unless I have a reason to necessarily. Not because I'm an asshole or something, but just because that's not really my personality. It's not really the way I'm geared toward. So I get it 100%. I don't balk at people that are outgoing, nor do I balk at people that are introverted either. And the only thing I do want though is if somebody is introverted, at least they're being themselves, not these fake people. I don't like people that are fake that walk around trying to put on this face oh, I'm a socialite or something when they're clearly not, and they're trying to put on this whole horse and pony show. To me, I don't like that. I'm I can't relate to people that are faking it like that. I just like people that are real, pretty much. But Enforcer, what say you?
I am really extroverted. Like, Matthew and me are actually polar opposites personality-wise. Matthew's really introverted, I'm really extroverted. So together, we make a team, because I'm usually the talking face is something, and Matthew's the one usually working on the administrative or business side of things in the background. So together we complement each other, because I don't really do the business side incredibly well, and Matthew doesn't feel like he does the talking side incredibly well. So it ends up balancing out where we make one whole person. It's kind of that's how it ends up working, especially with the channel. That's generally how it all comes out in the wash. But as far as it goes, I understand, Dark Sheep. You weren't trying to really diss on them or anything. They are awkward, but I never want to go out of their way to be like, oh, they're awkward, or something like that. Generally, I never try and ever make a discernment on people over anything like they're short, they're tall, they're fat, they're skinny. Like, I'll make jokes, sure, we can make plenty of jokes about all those things, but as far as actually judging them for it, I'd never, because no one can really control much of anything about themselves. They're just born the way they are and they grow into it. Like me, like I grew up into being a crooked freak, like with a crooked spine. I can't really control that, if people were dissing on it, I'd be like, well, that's kind of messed up. It's not really like I could stop my spine from being crooked. Much like a lot of people can't stop themselves from being introverted or extroverted. It's just who they are. But I completely get what you're saying, Dark Sheep. And as far as introverted people go, I always have a thing. Extroverts seek out the introverts. It's like a normal thing for extroverts, because the extroverts always find it nice to be able to open up an introvert and make them into a friend. I have a couple of friends who are introverts like that, that I'm great friends with. And I respect them a great deal because they mind their business a good bit, unlike myself. And I understand that sometimes that's not the greatest thing. But anyways, with that, I hope that is addressed up well. Huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, Plant Lord said people in classified positions are always careful in how they respond to questions in social settings. They used to be, for the most part. These days, it seems like it's getting a little bit more relaxed. There was just a guy who was just arrested by the military police because he was trying to pass on classified data about the M1A2 tank to Russia in exchange for Russian citizenship. And it's really that stupid. Like, I'm not joking about that. It sounds crazy, but believe it or not, there was actually someone stupid enough to try that. So now they got arrested for it, and they'll probably get convicted if it turns out to be that they're actually guilty of it. So pretty stupid. People these days are pretty loose with classified information, which doesn't make any sense.
Also, really quickly, I saw something. This sounded so sad. I was like, I don't want to leave this one unaddressed. Christopher Bernard said, "Man, my dream is to just ask you one question, Enforcer Matt. I get a job next week. I will get to ask my question. Ask it right now. I mean, we read the chat. Like, we do read the chat. It's just that sadly, there's so many people who talk every night. We can't."
Who said that?
Let's see. Christopher Bernard said that, and that sounded so sad. I was like, oh man, like, we read everyone's live chats, by the way. Like, it's just that we can't address all of them because we get, I think, like 50,000 live chats a night, so we can't really react to all of them. But I don't want you to feel like, it's a pay-to-play sort of a system. It's free to ask a question here. It's just that generally we have to manage time, and we always want to thank the people who support the channel because they make it possible for us to even run a show at all. But we do want to make sure to answer questions as well. So if you want to ask your question, go ahead and shoot, and we'll take the time to answer it because I don't want you to think it's a pay-to-play kind of a system or that you have to pay to have a question answered here. So with that, we are on to the next one in the meantime while we wait for your question.
All right. So our next super chat here goes to Christian Chaus, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Christian, for that support. He said, I love your guys' show. Between you guys and the Daily Wire, you two are my top source of news. And if conflict breaks out and the United States is attacked, what are the odds you think you'd enlist?
They wouldn't take me. I'd have to get drafted after they start lifting the draft requirements later. So unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to enlist. They just wouldn't take me because technically to them, I'm a cripple. It makes me angry because me personally, I know that war is hell and it's not anything to really seek out. But if your country calls, you have to go serve. And in this kind of a situation, there is definitely a point to serve. As far as Matthew, on the other hand, Matthew, would you volunteer or would you get drafted?
Honestly, I'll be honest, it would depend on what was breaking out. If Russia went to war with NATO and it looked like we were entering like a full-blown conflict with Russia, and then all of a sudden we saw, okay, it looks like China's jumping into this. Like, basically, if it turns into a full-blown world war where literally one hemisphere of the world's at war with the other one, I would strongly consider enlisting into the Air Force, very strongly. Now, me personally, I would consider maybe going into like a ground troop position possibly, but I would be more inclined to go toward the intel side of the Air Force just because I feel like I'd be better suited for that. But I would be open to either one. But it depends on basically how bad it's going to get. If it's something that we're obviously handling without like the need for a draft or something like that, I would probably say medium chances.
I would say that if a war broke out with Taiwan and we got involved in that war, let's remove the whole thing of my spine's crooked to the point no one will take me. And let's just say I'm physically fit. I would volunteer. If a war started in Europe, I would volunteer. Like if it was a world war that broke out, if it wasn't just something that happened in a couple of weeks and ended, and it looked like it was a big deal, you would bet I would volunteer. The Middle East, I don't really know, because honestly, the situation with Iran is something that the regular armed forces could deal with right now without it turning into a world war, and I just don't really see that becoming the case. So if it was the Middle East, It's still important for America's prerogatives. I still think we could deal with that without a full draft or a need to mobilize the whole nation. But if it's anything dealing with East Asia or Europe, I would volunteer if I had the chance. It's just that they wouldn't let me. So I would have to wait until later on in the war, if it was going on that long, for the Congress to go, okay, we're going to take people that like Enforcer that's a cripple, and then they'll finally take me, and then they'll draft me in, and then I'll finally be able to get in. So that's generally how it would work. But if I had the choice, I would volunteer. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, man, they understand that Christopher Bernard actually asked his question. So what was his question?
So Christopher said, "I wanted to know if 1 or 2 nuclear bombs means that we're all dead." And no,
No.
it actually wouldn't mean that. Even with the largest nuclear bombs that are currently possessed and actively fielded by, like for example, Russia, it would not mean the end of everything. It would obviously, it has the odds to decimate a city, like a nuclear bomb could do that. But just 1 or 2 of them, it would be pretty much localized wherever it hit. But Enforcer, what say you?
As far as 1 or 2 nuclear bombs, impact's minimal. Well, figuratively speaking, on the local level, as entire city could be wiped out by 1 nuclear warhead. But on the national level, it's something that we could deal with. It would end up consuming a lot of medical resources and pretty much all of our spare available resources at our disposal to be able to try and deal with the crisis that would come out of that. But it is something that we could manage. A decent amount of people would end up dying if it hit a major city. We can guarantee that a couple of 100,000 people would be dead with 1 nuclear warhead going off, and probably over 1 million would be wounded. But we could still deal with that, and we could still treat these people and try and work around it. But no matter the size of a nuclear bomb, even the Tsar bomb, which is the largest one that was ever detonated, it still would only cause a regional impact at the worst case scenario. So we would all be able to survive in general. We would be fine. There wouldn't be that much of a danger or anything like that involved in just 1 or 2 nuclear bombs. It would be dangerous for the people in this.
Pull up the blast radius calculator, Jamie. Let's show them that on the map.
Nuclear detonation map. Here we go. Nuke map. This is the one. This is the one. So we'll go with Birmingham. This is a good example. Let's see. Choose a warhead. Let's go with one that would be in service in the Russian Federation right now. The T'Pol.
Satan.
The T'Pol is actually a pretty numerous one. So this is a fairly normal one. This is what it would look like. So let me see if they have the casualty figures. Where are the casualty figures? Didn't they used to have them?
Go back up. I think it was up there somewhere.
Oh, here we are. Let's see. We're going to do
it again.
Okay, so let's say a nuclear bomb hit Birmingham, Alabama. Here's how big that nuclear detonation would be relative to the state of Alabama. Here's how big it would be relative to the United States. And this is a fairly common warhead that you would find in service in the Russian Federation right now. 112,000 people would be dead instantly, for a large part, from that explosion. Another 197,000 would be wounded. So if 2 of these hit the United States, the damage would be significant, at least in the local area, but it would not really impact the United States. It wouldn't kill everyone. It would take thousands. Actually, it would take about 1,000, roughly, give or take, to actually wipe out most of the U.S. as we would know it, and to kill off about 1/3 of the population immediately. Because as far as the nuclear war goes, Christopher, it's not as all-encompassing and destructive as a lot of people like to make it in the media, because the media talks down to people. They treat them like they're stupid, and I feel like that's a great disservice, because they'll sit there and say something like, nuclear bombs will destroy the world, which is not technically true. And also, the kind of impact that it would have after the bomb detonated is also quite minimal as well. Radioactive fallout from a nuclear bomb will only last for about 2 weeks, and it dissipates in strength exponentially. So it's an exponential curve downwards to non-radioactivity, to where it becomes normal background radiation, which is what you deal with every day. So after 2 weeks, the radiation is gone, the damage is still there, but it's pretty much over. It's largely like a giant normal bomb at that point went off 2 weeks later, and you're just kind of picking up all the pieces, clearing out debris, and rebuilding the city from that point on for the next several years. But as far as the impact, it's not like Fallout 4 or any sort of popularized media narrative on how a nuclear war would go. And if the entirety of the United States was nuked, which still would take about 1,000 nuclear weapons to thoroughly wipe it out, 1/3 of everyone would be dead within the bombs detonating. Another 1/3 would be dead within the first 2 years. and then everyone else, the third that was left surviving, they would live on after this quote-unquote nuclear apocalypse. So generally, it's shooting against the odds to expect survival in a nuclear exchange. You could survive the bombs. Like, there's actually a high chance you will survive the first bombing because you're running a 2 in 3 chance. But as far as actually surviving beyond 2 years after the bomb's going off, now you're shooting against the odds. Then it's a 50-50 chance that you might survive those next 2 years or not. But I hope that does answer your question fairly well, Christopher, because I always want folks to know you don't have to pay to have a question answered here. Like, I never wanted to be like that. We have a lot of super chatters, though, and usually it looks like you have to pay to get a question answered, but it was a good question, and I also wanted to make sure to go out of my way to answer yours because I didn't want you to think you had to pay to get a question answered. And it was a good one, nonetheless. But with that, I hope that has addressed that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Wait What, who puts in a $10 donation. They said, as enforcers, we are under no obligation to wear pants while narrating. I'm in a full-on suit, good sir. No, not really. I'm just wearing my normal stuff at this point. Pretty casual for summer, but pants are an obligation. And enforcer, what say you?
I when I'm running the show, I wear normal shorts and a white T-shirt every single night. You can guarantee that that's what I'm wearing. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one also goes to Wait What, who puts in a 10. He said, who is mom's favorite one? I couldn't answer that question for you. I'll be honest with you. Wouldn't know the answer to that question. But anyways, enforcer, what say you?
I wouldn't even know. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Plazath, who puts in a 7. And thank you very much, Plazath, as well, for that support. And they said, LSA.
And LSA, baby! And a huge thanks to Plazath for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we got a 5 from Hands on Fire, who said, thank you guys for all the hard work. And without you, I'd be lost.
And thank you so much for enjoying our hard work. Hands on fire. Oh, my hands are on fire. That was what that was supposed to be. But thank you so much for enjoying our work. And I don't think you'd be lost without us. I'm sure you could manage, but it would be a little tougher. And a huge thanks to you for enjoying this channel and finding to be worth its salt, or worth its weight, I guess. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Joshua A, who puts in a 5. And he said, LFG, LSA, USA. Have a great show. No more hiccups. And thank you for the work.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Joshua. And honestly, folks, I don't even know how in the world the microphones weren't unmuted. Because I told you, Matthew, I was like, unmute and make sure not to say anything. I clicked them to unmute them. And then clicked off of the window. And then they automatically remuted themselves. I've never seen that happen before.
Man,
like,
OBS didn't want to hear us talk.
Man, OBS said, shut your mouth. Like, and I was like, dang, bro, like screwing up the whole intro. The chat was flying though. Let me actually tell y'all, the chat rate at that moment was, at least from what they're reporting right now, and it's usually 3 times higher when we actually get off air, they're saying it was 450 chats in a minute. So that means in reality, once the real stats come out, it's probably like 1,500 chats in that 1 minute when that happened. Because everyone's like, there's no noise. Like, there is no noise. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, there isn't. I was like, and so we had to mute it and everything. That was so annoying. That was so annoying. That's never happened in a long time, and it happened tonight. And we had a lot of news to cover too. But beyond that, I do thank you for support, Joshua. But thank you so much for enjoying our work with the technical issues in mind. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Clayton Wilkie, who puts in a 5. He said, good day, both enforcers. I've been listening to the first show you did and every 5th show onwards. And who was that first bloke you started with back then, part 1?
Well, that was actually before the Great Schism. There is actually a bit of history on this channel over the years. Our history has luckily gotten a lot more streamlined, but back in the beginning of the channel, it was a turbulent time. So way back when the channel blew up, on the first night, being the naive kind of person I was back then, because I didn't really understand how people were. Because, also to tell y'all a little bit, not a lot about our personal lives, but a little bit, we were really isolated growing up. We weren't really allowed, or really were able to deal with a lot of people. Like, we would go to school, and then we were forced to go immediately straight home. And we lived in the country, so we really didn't get to deal with anyone. So generally, I always had a very positive outlook on everyone. I was always like, well, you know, people are nice. I'm sure, you know, I never really met a lot of them, but I'm sure they're pretty nice folks, you know, beyond the people in school, because, you know, Matthew and me weren't really treated that well in school either. Like teachers, students, like were all out for us because we were the outliers. We weren't, you know, like this whole, anyways, moving on from that. So, way back then, the channel blew up on the 4th day. I was like, oh my God, it blew up. And there was these people who said, hey, we'll help you out. And, you know, help you out with running the channel. And I was like, yeah, that would be great. You know, like that would be wonderful to know the people who enjoy the show are helping out with it. That'd be nice. And they volunteered, you know, like they volunteered from the outset. And that person was one of them. And so over the next 2 or 3 weeks after that, they start getting a little bit more demanding. And then they start telling me what I can and can't say on the show. And as far as I'm concerned, it's like, it's great that they're volunteering, but they're not volunteering to tell me how to run the show. They're volunteering because they wanted to help to run it. And, you know, not tell me how to run it. So I was like, okay, now there's some issues. And then this guy started to say that I needed to put everyone, including him, on a payroll. And I was like, okay, first off, I was like, I'm not putting Discord moderators on a payroll. That just doesn't happen. 2, the channel was not making enough money to literally bankroll, what was it, like 12 people, including him. I was like, that is not how this is working. I was also like, on top of this, it's like, I have to make a living off of this thing. And if I end up trying to pay 12 people some kind of a livable income, there is only enough income here for one livable income right now after taxes. I was like, so this doesn't make any sense at all. So they
thought you were Jeff Bezos.
Oh yeah, they thought I was Jeff Bezos, man. They thought I was made of money or something. So I was saying there, I was like, this is just outrageous at this point. So Matthew was brought on because that guy went on some sort of a hiatus to go to some national park or something for a week. And so Matthew came on to fill in his place. And I was like, hey man, look, I gotta, like, this situation is looking a little sketch. And the manager's like, this is really, really bad. And I was like, yeah, it's starting to look bad. So like, we're going to have to figure out something about this because, you know, this is looking like this is about to turn bad. So finally, one night, and this is what is called the night of the Great Schism, which has a whole other thing to do with a whole other thing that happened that I would love to forget. But anyways, they started to ban people out of the stream that super chatted on this night. This is called the Great Schism, is when this happened. They started to ban people who were super chatting that made up the only income the channel made. And on top of that, they also started to say all kinds of things about the channel, just trying to smear it and pretty much cancel it. So we had to take multiple intermissions off air during that time to start banning these people out of the Discord, because we actually had a fan Discord back then that was moderated by these people. That's why they were moderators. And they were also moderators in the chat. Had to ban them everywhere. And then we had to go. And we also had to do a whole bunch of other stuff as well. It was a whole deal in the middle of the show trying to run it. And so then they all got cleared out. And then we started to get a second wave of moderators, and then the second wave of moderators on the Discord channel, not the YouTube channel, just the Discord. They did the same thing later, which is what's called the Second Great Schism. But beyond, yeah, that's why, also to quickly explain, that's why we do not have a direct enforcer run Discord server, because I'm not having that happen again. Dealing with Discord moderators are the worst. Like, it is absolute hell, because they act like they're kings or something like that, and I'm just not into dealing with that sort of a thing. Like, this is already.
I think that was when I got my reputation as the infiltrator at that point, because I had infiltrated all the scheming they were doing, because I had detected some red flags. And also, Mestiza said not all mods are bad people.
Yeah,
you're
true.
right, but we've had some nasty experiences in the past with them. As you know, you've seen it too. But it's like, I think back then I had to go in and infiltrate their group, because they were all scheming together with one another to try to either start dictating how it was going to go or something like that. So I had to go in there and figure out what they were up to. So we figured it out. We set up a contingency plan, and literally the moment that the second group did what they were going to do, we put the plan in motion, locked it down, and had it under control. But after that, though, it was like, hell, if they're going to do that every time, I might as well just not have moderators at that point. It's better to do it without. And ever since then, we have not had any moderators. It's just been me and the enforcer doing everything, except for the fan Discord server. It's totally separate from us, but that's out there. But outside of that, though, it's just me and the enforcer.
Yeah, I have to say, not all Discord moderators are bad. There are good Discord moderators out there. But as far as our personal experience running in official Enforcer channel Discords, most of them, like I would say 70% of them, were bad. We still actually have some people who were around who were former moderators on those servers that still watch this channel and are in the live chat. And to them, I thank y'all. I thank y'all greatly for still being around to this day and also dealing with that with me and Enforcer Matt, especially on both schisms. But as far as ever running a Discord server again that's officially a part of the channel, absolutely not. Like that will never happen again. With fan Discord servers are fine, like as long as there's like a general blessing giving to them. But our official Discord will never happen again. So yeah, that's that's what I have to say on that. But that's what happened to that first guy. He was a part of that group, so he ended up going as well. So and also he got replaced once Enforcer Matt showed up, because this guy started to make it clear to me that he was just going to kind of be flaky. He would be there some days and not others, and I was like, that's not how this is working. Like, it's like, we've got to be here every day. People are counting on us to tell them the news. And that was also something that I didn't really get. It's like, so you want to get paid, but you don't feel like you have a dedicated service to the people watching our show to give them news. Like I didn't get that either, because I was like, this isn't like a mom and pop shop kind of a thing. There's like today it's grown into something where 7 million people a month, actually it's like 7 million people a month are counting on this channel to tell them what's going on. Like, the gravity of that is huge. That's the entire city of New York City watching this channel monthly for news. That is a very important sort of a thing to run. Like, that's something that you have to be consistent with. You can't take off a lot of time. Like, here and there you can, because, everyone's got to have a vacation and a break every once in a while. But you can't sit there and just act like people's like time and their attention and their dedication is nothing, to where you just say, oh, I'm just going to take a break. I'll make my schedule intermittent. That's not how this works. And I was like,
They thought it was going to be like just like a casual hobby or something like that. They didn't understand. Also, I think they had some different motives in mind. I'm not even real sure if they were really interested in actually doing anything legit. But it's like we were planning on running it as like a proper news channel, like we've done. We weren't going to do it like where it's just like, oh, we'll hop on sometimes, we'll just hop on some other times. It's like, no, this is going to be like a serious deal. Because look at Hot Dog Man. He's a perfect example of what a failed news channel looks like. He hops on whenever he feels like it. He's not consistent. Also, his delivery is terrible. That's just my personal opinion, and that's why he has such little subscribers, because nobody wants to hear like unprofessional commentary like that constantly, and that's why he's failed. So I think we're like living proof that doing it this way is a lot better.
And also another thing, like, I have thought maybe we would try and run an official Discord server at some point in the future. Not really that dead set on that. Like, chances of that are very, very low. But if we ever did that and we ever had to start building up a pool of moderators, it would be a requirement, like like an absolute requirement, that if we had moderators, we had their name, their first and last name, we had their home address, and we verified that that was their home address, and a million other things. Because if anything was going to happen, like in the first and second schism, I'm just going to be entirely honest with y'all, I would be going after them in the legal system for what those people were trying to do. Because if I actually did, like, just to be entirely honest with y'all, people going around and trying to say stuff about the channel, like especially people who, we put into a position like being a moderator or something like that, and then they sit there and go, oh, okay, well, you did something I didn't like. You said something I didn't like on air. So now I'm going to use my position as a moderator to try and screw y'all over and pretty much destroy your business. It's like, oh, no. It's like, that is not going to be happening. It's like that will not happen again if we ever get put in that position. It's like, then the people are going to have to start learning that, while we are quite nice, and I like to be nice, trying to mess with people like that ain't happening. Like, that's just going to be the honest truth. And they'd also have to be Americans, because we have to make sure that they're in the same court system that we're in, either at the state or the federal level. So that would just generally be the case. And also, that's just too complicated. Like, if we have to go through that much stuff to pretty much set up folks to where you have to go through legal action if they do something crazy, it's like, that's not even worth running it at that point. I don't want to get involved in that kind of nasty business. So it just is best not to run one. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I hope that does answer that question well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, moving on to our next super chat here. This one is going to go to none other than Clayton Wilkie. Once again, he has two more. He has a part two. He said, good day again. I've been enjoying the early shows, and the show has changed so much from the start, and I'm up to show 30 now and doing every fifth show an LSA.
Hey, and that's really cool to hear. Actually, I got to say, the show has changed a whole load over the years. Really, like the actual premise of the show is identical, but our presentation and our ability to speak has improved greatly. That's one thing that you can definitely tell from the start. I've actually heard some people say that we sounded totally different people when we first started the show, and that's definitely true. But still, a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I was just curious because we've noticed recently we have about 5 or 6 YouTube shorts, and when we say shorts, we don't mean like the short war videos that are like 20 minutes long. We mean like the 60-second vertical video reels that YouTube shows you, like TikTok videos. We have about 6 of them on the channel, and a lot of people don't even know we have them because we don't do them as a main like operation on the channel. But it looks like about 49% said yes, they do watch those that we have, and 51% said no. I was just curious because someone mentioned it a minute ago and was like, "Hey, do y'all have shorts?" And I was like, "How many people actually watch those on the channel?" So about half, actually. So quite interesting. But unfortunately, what say you?
I would have to say that's actually really interesting because I actually generally expected that a lot of our longer form viewers, like people on the streams, probably don't watch that kind of stuff, but it's actually a 50-50 split. So that's actually a little bit shocking to me. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Why the hell am I saying that? Why am I saying that right now? I'm a broken record. But thank you all for voting on that. That's very interesting. I love to synergize with all of y'all and get to know y'all like a family. Anyways, it is time for us to move on into the next one. Also, I see some people talking about, thank you for sharing that story. Yeah, that's one we don't really talk about a lot anymore because a lot of that early channel history kind of side of things, it's like water under the bridge at this point, like 3.5 years ago or longer. It's crazy because it feels like yesterday in some senses, but it's also a distant memory in real life time figures. And it's just crazy to think about that. But it's even crazier to think about the endless kinds of battles that were going on back then against everything. Like the schism, the first and second great schisms were one thing. Then there was the hot dog man deal, and then the YouTube war that happened. There was like a whole bunch of stuff that was happening at the start of the channel, and honestly, I gotta be honest with y'all folks, it was hell on earth. Like, I love running the show, and I really love it now because a lot of the stuff that we used to have as issues, because there was like issues on air, off air, there was literally issues everywhere we went. Everything, not to make it sound like it's pessimistic, but life back then was truly living hell on earth. Like everywhere there was a problem. The only thing that was actually enjoyable to do was actually running the show itself or making a video. But beyond that, everything else was absolutely hell on earth. It was difficult, it was tough, people were making problems at every turn. And somehow we kept it running. I don't even know how, because looking back at it, I'm like, I was stressed out to the point that I was like getting no sleep sometimes just because I was that stressed out. Every once in a while that still happens these days, but I was that stressed out, and somehow we pulled through. And I know Matthew was stressed out like that too, because like literally people were coming out of the woodworks just to try and rip the channel down, like just from anywhere and everywhere.
Man, I
Weird
remember I
stuff.
was getting mad as hell. Like I was getting so mad during that time period. Like honestly, like generally, I consider myself a very easy to get along type person. But I do obviously have my limits like anybody else. People were testing my limits like hell, like at the very beginning, like that. Like this internet mob that has been created, or that really want to come after us on this channel for whatever reason, is their leader, the hot dog man, told them to do it. They were testing my patience like crazy. They pushed me over my limit several times. I went off sometimes on people, which honestly I kind of regret today that I actually went off like that. But it's just it's just ridiculous. Like when you see people getting in internet mobs and deciding just to randomly go after people like that. But other people have gotten a taste of it from Hot Dog Man and other
And they
people that do
broken
that type of
down.
stuff. And they break down within like the first day or two because it's obviously a huge amount of pressure coming from a large group of people that you don't even know. So I don't know. Like I think there ought to be more stringent protections against stuff like that YouTube or somebody puts into place that doesn't allow that to happen. To be honest.
And also I see Silence say, what did they do? Well, like to give a little bit of like channel background, the schisms were one thing. We've already told you all about the first and second schisms and how they generally went. So in the midst of all that, way back, I'll cut down the story and try and make it short and just hit all the highlights. Way back in the day, someone came onto our live chat and said on a stream, hey, this guy, the hot dog man as we call him, because we'll never mention their channel name and they're never getting a plug or credit for anything on this channel. Their name will never be known. Some people know who he is. but their name will never be mentioned here on the stream or anywhere related on the channel. But outside of that, they said, hey, the hot dog man has literally ripped off your intro, your title, and your thumbnail. And back then, starting as a channel, like that's a really big identifying thing, is putting in a lot of time and effort, painstaking time and effort, to figure out your own style, like your thumbnail, title, and all that sort of stuff. So I saw that this guy was ripping it. I mean, literally ripping, plagiarizing the stuff like hell. He does it on other people these days. He literally like rotates it. Whatever big channel looks like they're working right now, he just tries to copy their thumbnail and title because the guy is low energy and low creative effort. So I said on the stream one night, I said, hey, this person knows who they are, but I just don't really appreciate that, and I'd like it if they stopped. And that guy sat there after that and went on a campaign to try and destroy us. He started claiming that we were scammers. We started claiming that we were stealing money. He started claiming that we were terrible people. He started saying that we were a certain kind of extreme political affiliation. He doxed us. He tried to have us swatted when we were in law school. He tried every single way he could to try and get us destroyed. They tried mass reporting our stuff. They tried everything. And then when we tried to take action against him to stop him from doing this, because he was quite literally trying to destroy everything in our lives, not just the YouTube channel, but our very lives, or maybe even our life. Once we tried to do something about it, then every other YouTuber back in the day that was of significant note, most of them have ended up not being of significant note anymore, came out of the woodworks to say, this guy is entirely justified in what he's doing, and the enforcers are wrong for trying to defend themselves. And then we ended up losing thousands of subscribers over that. It was a whole deal. But in the long run, what is a little bit comforting to know is that most of those channels, save for about one, has ended up falling completely to the wayside. They practically don't even exist anymore, including him, the hot dog man. And so that's a bit of a solace in itself, is that pretty much all of those people ended up being their own demise. But it was an absolute hell on earth, because all that was happening at the same time. The schisms, the hot dog man deal, the YouTube war, all that happening literally within the span of about a year. And then also we had a whole bunch of stuff off air that I'm not going to bring up because that's personal stuff, but that also created a pretty much an atmosphere of hell, even when we were not dealing with everything on the internet. Then it was hell on earth to just live. Yeah, at that point. So, you know, it was a crazy time. It's pretty much all over at this point. The show's pretty simple. We get on, we run it, and we get off. And I'm happy to keep it that way. With that, also, Hurry Fred said, Dennis is chill though. Yeah, Dennis wasn't one of the people involved in that though. It's another channel. Like Dennis and CivDiv and all those folks, they're great folks. Like I appreciate them a great deal. They're nice folks. But the other ones,
it's just a handful. It was just a handful of people. And what the weird part is, like you mentioned, the ones that came after us are the ones that their channels went down the toilet. Like every single channel that came after us and tried to wrongfully smear our name for no reason whatsoever based on lies. If you go and look at those channels, all except for one of them have literally failed. Like they're down to no views. I'm not saying that like, oh, they got what they deserved. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. That's what's happened. Like if you go check their channels out, it's almost zero now.
yeah, it's a comforting thing to see that they eventually ended up being their own demise. But that's a little bit of the story. In case y'all are wondering what used to happen way back in the day, this channel was born out of the forges of fire, like it was. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to LC39A. Once again, he throws in another $115 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, for that second massive support of night. And we sincerely do appreciate that. He said, you got a good thing going, and never change a winner. And we're not changing a winner. We were talking about in the background, like throughout the days, like recently, about doing different video projects. But even if we do that, though, it'll probably be on a second channel if we do that. We don't want to change our main channel because this thing is running great. Y'all like the way it's running. Y'all like the way we present it. So we want to keep it that way. So I agree with you. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say we are never going to change a thing about this channel. We're never going to get political. We're always going to stick to our core tenets that we've always had on the channel. And I love to know that people enjoy it for that. It's crazy to think, folks, that the vision that was had 3.5 years ago, really even longer than that, almost 4 years ago, has lived to this day and has become one of the most successful ones in America on YouTube. I love to think that. That's just an amazing thing to think. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here, also, by the way, I see some people saying, Well, let's see. It's giving you guys character you have today. Honestly, I've started, the older I've gotten, and I'm just 25. So when I say older, I'm not super old. Like, oh, I've got some like really like large wisdom or something like that. But the little bit of wisdom I have gained at 25, I've learned that nasty experiences, you can look at it like, oh, that was really terrible that happened to me. I'm so unlucky. Or you can look at it like, well, it was obviously, really shitty. I had to go through that. Like, I didn't deserve it, but I did learn something from it and I grew from it. And even though I wouldn't want to relive it, I wouldn't be the person I am today unless I went through that pain. And because the pain changes you in certain different ways that you don't realize until you look back in retrospect. And honestly, it is a learning experience. Obviously, I wouldn't want to relive it, but it was a learning experience. But anyways, jumping onto our next super chat here, this one goes to none other than Clayton Wilkie once again, and he puts in a 5 and says, Part 3, the early show, way back, show 25, was trying to have talks, Putin to end the war way back then, and 3 years of Putin bullshit, and still talking out of his ass.
Yeah, and it's is that every year everyone acts like it's a new deal and it's not. And I wish people would wise up to that and realize that, like you have, and like we have, and we've been saying for years. So a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Also, I'd have to agree with Matthew. Like, the bad times are bad, but they strengthen you. They're character building, and they teach you things. Honestly, folks, I'd have to say that you learn more from failure than you do from victory, at least on a personal level. And true experience, I can say that that is true. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to SD NSO Group Unit 46 once again, who puts in a 5. They said hit the like and take one from the chat.
Hey, and please do hit the like, folks. We're actually almost up to 5,000 likes, and we will get one from the chat in your honor, SD. So what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question is going to go to Thomas Miller, who said, didn't the embargo on U.S. oil to Japan, since they wouldn't back out of China in World War II, didn't that literally trigger Pearl Harbor?
Technically it did, but they were already planning on attacking us anyways, because they generally had a territorial ambition where they were going to take control of the Philippines and also most of the islands in the Pacific, including Midway and I believe eventually Hawaii at some point, if I'm not mistaken. So, actually no, I don't think Hawaii was included. I think Midway was the absolute extent that they wanted to go eastwards, but that still was a U.S. territory at the time. So they would have gone to war with us anyways at some point in the future. It's just that the embargo put a timetable on it to where they started it off quicker than they wanted to. So I hope that does address it the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have A15 New Zealand from AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, Channel Legend, and he puts in trophy. And thank you very much for trophy, good sir. And Enforcer, what say you?
And a big thanks to you, AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, for the support. And help with this channel to keep running. And I gotta say, thank you for the trophy. We're massively appreciative. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Alan Mandel, and then big thanks to you, Alan, for that $5 support, and we do appreciate that very much. We also have a 5 from, excuse me, Michael Tripto, who said, as a dad and father, if I make a threat, I follow through. Damn.
I don't know what you...
He's a serious father, I tell you what. He's going to follow through. Honestly, that sounds kind of intimidating right there, but Enforcer, what say you?
I don't know what you mean that in context of, but that's interesting, Michael. I'll keep that in advisement. But a big thanks to you for the support and help this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Cobalt Lobster, who puts in a 5. They said Saudi Arabia was the #1 importer of Russian oil, and India is a sideshow.
I don't think that's the case, because Saudi Arabia is, I think, the second largest oil producer in the world next to the United States. So it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for them to be importing the goods, considering that they make the goods more than the Russians do. Or at least they're number 3. They're number 3 or they're number 2, but Russia and Saudi Arabia are neck and neck. So I don't really think that's the case, and most of the graphs and analytics that I've been able to find say that China and India are the main consumers. But with that, a big thanks to you once again for support, and we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Michael Cobb, who puts in a 5. He said, war is coming, and I'm not a huge fan of having to fight the big 3 without allies, and we need Manhattan LVL arms race in the West.
I would say we have allies. We got the Europeans. We've got a lot of East Asian allies. We've got plenty of allies around the world, really, from what I can tell. So we will have friends for sure going into this one. But I would have to say that we certainly need to have major technological breakthroughs in the outbreak of that war or through the continuation of that war, because that's the only way that you can succeed is to out-innovate the enemy and also outshoot them. Like, that's also a really big one. But a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $5 super chat from Andrew Honeycutt. And Andrew said, it's prudent for one to sift through several news sources pragmatically and rationally, and rarely do I find myself in disagreement with the enforcers.
Hey, well, thank you so much for the kind words of the support there. And I gotta say, thank you for saying that you find yourself rarely in disagreement with us. We try and be as rational as possible with our analysis here on the channel, and I hope that it shows through every day. So a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $5 super chat from El Cuva. And they said, thanks for the super chat. And thank you for the super chat.
Hey.
That threw me for a loop right there. You said thank you for the super chat. We're supposed to say thank you for the super chat. I said, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And you know it, El Cuva. But a huge thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, like you said, we're on to the next one. Isn't that funny? You knew what I was going to say. It's almost like I say that after every super chat. I say that after every super chat. That's supposed to be Tucker. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt again, and he puts in a 5. He said, is the reason why the baddies smell blood in the water, is it a result of the lack of a concrete and unified stance for the U.S. and NATO and LSA all the way?
I would say so, because if we acted as a unified force, we are the largest military force on the planet, especially with NATO as a whole. If we acted as a unified, concerted force, nobody would dare ever go against us, because they would know that attacking us would equal certain death. But the thing is that they were thinking that there's enough fracturing inside of the NATO alliance that it might not be the case that certain death would be a damn near likelihood. So that's what I'd have to say on that. I think that would be the case. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Detroit Adam, and he puts in a 2 and says, I love paternity leave. LSA, best show on earth.
Hey, and paternity leave, it's a great thing, but it is not a right. I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm not getting into the whole deal with that. In America, the corporations say it isn't a right, but Nestle also says that water isn't a human right, so I don't really know. It's like, that's a little bit of a tough one. But, it's not like Nestle's hands are clean. If you know anything about Nestle, they had a little bit of an interesting track record through the Second World War. It was really interesting stuff that they did. I encourage you all to look into it. But
are you sure Nestle said that water isn't a human right?
Yes, the CEO actually said, Google it. It was one of their CEOs actually said that water is not a human right.
Let's see here. Let's see. It says here that former Nestle chairman believes water is a human right. He advocates for universal access to drinking water. I think he might be getting confused with somebody else.
Who said water is not a human right? It's out there somewhere. Hold up. Oh, hang on. He changed the statement. Because there's some news outlets here saying, the Nestle CEO, and that's the one, Brabeck, no longer claims that water is not a human right following recent controversy. So it got a lot of backlash. And then he said, wait a minute, actually it is. But his original statement was that it wasn't.
Oh, he must have just misspoke. That was all.
Maybe. Allegedly. But, some people say some crazy stuff, sometimes, like that guy, he might have said it accidentally, allegedly, but, yeah, it's a kind of an interesting thing with that whole paternity leave thing. Me personally, folks, I'd have to say, in my personal opinion, for the societal impact, which is something that a lot of people don't think about, because it isn't always about the shareholders, paternity leave is something that is incredibly important, because letting a mother get out of work to be able to raise the next generation of workers seems to be an important thing to me. So, just to be entirely honest with y'all, just to be absolutely frank, I don't really care if this is political or not. As far as society is concerned, giving the maximum amount of maternity leave by a law is probably the most beneficial thing for the impact it'll have on society as a whole. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to LC39A, who puts in a $116 donation. And huge thanks to you, sir, for that massive third support of the night. Literally, massive support. It's like he's trying to buy stock in the channel, although we don't have any stock. But thank you very much, LC39A. He said, as an 82-year-old, what you read in the history books, I read in the newspapers, LOL. Honestly, that's kind of cool, though. Like, I know some people are like, oh, like old people aren't up with the times and stuff like that. I find like a value perspective in all of it. Like the older people are still grounded, honestly, in my personal opinion, they're grounded in reality. The younger people are less grounded in reality, but they have a better understanding of like technology. So between the two, they need balancing out. Like to have one over the other is not a good thing. So honestly, I think that's a good thing. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say LC39A. I think that this is always really cool. Actually, to be honest with you, LC39A, Matthew will know this to be really true. I never had friends that were actually my age growing up. All of my friends were always in the 50s and the 70s and stuff. And usually there were folks who had really interesting stories. Most of them served in the military. And the reason why a lot of people are like, wow, he speaks with a great deal of knowledge on military topics. Did he serve? No, I just listened to these people. I would listen to him talk. And there was one guy who lived on a street I grew up in our hometown, and his name was Bill Pfeiffer, and he was a great guy. He was a guy who actually served in the Air Force as a electrician in Vietnam, and he got there during the middle of the Tet. He landed on an airfield in the midst of the Tet offensive. Gunfire was going on one end of the runway. They landed, immediately dropped the back door, unloaded everything, and then the C-130 taxied around and took right back off. He ended up actually going across the border and setting up CIA listening posts in Cambodia. The guy did things that an electrician usually wouldn't do. He was pretty much a combat electrician, was the best way to put it. And he was an amazing guy. And when I knew him, he was much older in years, of course. Vietnam was about 50 years ago by that time, and he was riddled with Parkinson's, and he was slowly dying. But he told me a lot of things that his family said he didn't even tell them. And I always find that to be a great honor to be able to listen to folks who lived through those times and are what's in the history books, because the history isn't a story of events, it's a story of people. And it's a story of their struggles, their sacrifices, their successes, their luxuries, everything in between, from the good and the bad. And it's a really interesting thing to get to listen to those folks and listen to what their times were like and what they went through and what they did and what they found fun and what they hated and all those sorts of things, because it really gives you an idea of how far people have come, even just from the generations that came before you, much less the ones that are relegated to only the pages of history at this point, and you can only really get an understanding of who they were through what they wrote or what was written about them. But it's an amazingly interesting, and I got to thank you for the support and being here at 82 years old. I think that technically makes you either the silent generation or a baby boomer. I'm not really sure which one, but it's always great to have folks who are way up in years, because I have a great deal of respect for a lot of people who are older, because they have lived and seen many things that I also will live and see through our time, because our times are certainly going to be as interesting as everyone else's time through their generations. And eventually I'll be just like you, 80 years old, and I'll be telling someone, something that you read in the books is something I saw in the papers, or something that we were talking about here on air like we are right now. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. Thank you for the massive support and the kind words. It means a lot coming from folks like you, especially folks who lived through a lot of stuff that you're reading in the papers, and you're still reading and listening about it right now too. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
One question I like to ask people that are the elders, generally speaking, and also when I say old, I don't mean it as an insult, by the way. I just want to make that clear in case I say that. Some people might be like, "Oh, you called me old?" I'm just saying the elders. But I like to always ask, was life better when you were younger, at our age, or is it better now? Like in your opinion, I always ask every person in an elder age bracket that same question. And I get different responses. I generally get the same answer every time. I won't say the answers. I want to hear what people generally say right now in the live chat. But I have a question for LC39A. Was life better when you were 25 versus right now when I'm 25 years old, in your personal opinion? That's what I'm always curious about.
I would be curious to hear that as well. I wonder what folks are going to say about that. And so with that, while we wait to see what folks are going to say about that, because statistically everyone who's watching this channel is older than us for the most part. Very few are younger or the same age. We'll wait and see what y'all have to say. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2. He said, LSA at the like button, that's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is an order. We've gotten up to nearly 5,000 likes at this point. We're very close. So please do hit the like button, folks. It means a lot to us. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Derek Pruce, who puts in a 2. He said, seems like a little pillow talk before war. WDYT.
Pillow talk? I don't think a lot of people are doing pillow talk. Heavens, pillow talk. Damn you. Beyond that, I'd have to say, maybe so. I mean, you might actually be right on that, Derek. It might actually be a little bit of that diplomacy style pillow talk, if you want to call it that, that's happening before the war. Maybe. I'd hope not, but might be. But a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next. Actually, I'm seeing a lot of people. Man, actually, a lot of people are saying a whole bunch of different stuff, Matthew, that I actually haven't heard before. Because most people usually say, at least from what I know, Matthew, that life was better back then. And a lot of y'all are actually saying that, you know, it was sometimes better, but sometimes worse. So that's actually interesting to see.
Me personally, I generally see people saying, people that are older, they usually say that times were better in the past. I would tend to believe just being an observer of the past times. Now, obviously, there were some cultural things that obviously had to get fixed, that thankfully have been fixed to a larger extent today. Those things right there obviously need to remain fixed. But from a financial viewpoint and also from a quality of life standpoint, I personally think that life back before I was even born, to be honest with you, and also during my very early days when I was a really small child, were better than it is today, just because I think a lot of people get confused. Just because we're becoming more efficient as a society, that doesn't mean that life is better. In fact, that usually means that life's getting worse, because the more efficient you become, the more tied up you are in technology, working, etc. You don't have time for actually enjoying your life. And I think that's what a lot of people are discovering today is with AI taking over, technology getting more efficient. People are finding themselves stuck in this bubble, this technology bubble, where they don't have a real life outside of that bubble, which is really distorting people's reality very badly, and it leads to a worse quality of life. Just me personally, that's what I think.
Possibly so. But then again, you know, like, just to say this, I always have to be the devil's advocate with this kind of stuff. People who were in their 80s in the 1920s said time was better back in their day. People who were in their 80s and the 60s were saying things were better back in their day. It's always been like that. The society is always evolving. It's an ever-changing thing. Even the way people talk is always changing and has been forever. And so people will always be raised and grow up with something that they think is the perfect gold standard, the norm, the ideal. And then times change and time moves on. And then they grow up in that changing world. And then in their older age, a lot of people go, man, it was a lot better back when it was what I was familiar with and what I grew up with and what I pretty much had imprinted on me because of my age as the gold standard of life. Not to say that today is perfect or, you know, it's peachy. There are a lot of issues and challenges of today. But I mean, hell, even people who grew up in the Great Depression, you know, they would get into the 70s and the 80s. They were like, it's financially successful now, but man, you know, it was a lot better back in the Depression. Things felt like they really counted back then. Like, people actually would say that kind of stuff. You know, like, yeah, we were hungry, but, you know, we had family, you know, we felt connected. You know, and so I think a lot of people will just say that anyways, because things are always changing, for better or for worse. And even if it is for the better, it's not like it used to be. And if it was for the worse, it's still not like it used to be.
I think just from a societal standpoint, though, like people really valued people more back in the day. That's something, in my opinion, that's observable. And also financially, you can look at the data and see that just literally, honestly, here's how recent this has changed. Just in the last 10 years alone, you could afford a house a lot easier than you afford one today. That's how fast things are changing in a bad way, and nobody seems to want to address that at all. Like, nobody's addressing that. In fact, people are actively burying that problem like it doesn't exist, and it's just growing larger and larger and larger, and nobody's dealing with it. Previously, people actually tried to attend to those problems. It may not always be super quick the way they handled it, but they at least got around to it. There's like a consistent pattern of ignoring, like, For example, the cost of living, being ignored, things like that. And also people not really treating other people as people. And these days, people are treated like numbers and data. Like, large corporations employ a ton of people. It's not small mom and pop shop businesses employing people anymore. It's more of these large, like, faceless corporations that really don't care about people as individuals. And that's not some, like, random idea right there. That's the way a lot of people feel. And it was different back in the day. It was a lot different.
I would actually have to argue it was worse in some ways back then. Like a lot of the labor laws, like corporations these days. Oh, we're family with synergy. All the corporate speak. And they still don't give a damn about you. Back then, they didn't even give a damn about you to even give you safety equipment. Like if you worked in like say a steel factory, good luck. I mean, you could end up getting killed at any minute in there, and there was really nothing that could happen. I mean, back in the early days of the railroads, like just speaking on the historical level there, because that's something that's existed through, about the past 150 years or so. Back in the day, if you got injured on the job, there was no workers' compensation. There was no time off. They just fire you. You were out of the job, and there was no sort of help at all monetarily to even help you out. You literally were just a number. You were a guy doing a job, and if you got wounded, well, you must have been stupid and unfortunate for you because now you're fired, and we're going to go get someone to replace you. There wasn't even a law to protect you back then. Because if it was ideal back then, like if it was better, then why were there riots? Why were there labor unions? Why were there strikes? Why was there constant fights inside of the government? Why were there assassination attempts on presidents or senators or representatives? Why were there civil wars? Like why was there why were there fires, plagues, famines? All the things that we know of today happened back then. And
Well, there's
honestly,
always going to be the fringe. Like the fringe will always exist. Like I'm speaking mainly about, like, for example, people that want to fulfill like their duty in society to make the society better. Like they get a job, they're productive. If they can or if they want to, they have a family, they raise children. Generally, what's considered being productive to society. Those people today, they're starting to feel invisible and they feel isolated. That's something across the board that even the surveys and data show that people feel that technology is boxing people in and nobody wants to socialize. And that's also another data-driven point as well. And it's all because of this change in the internet, social media, society, etc., that's becoming that way. And that's a new thing that we were just learning to deal with literally right now. I think we're the first generation that's actually really properly dealing with that full-fledged. And me personally, I'm noticing it's not working that great because it looks like young people are not getting married as often. They're also not dating as much either. And it's leading to a lot of problems that's going to cause a real problem in the country when these older generations start, passing away.
yeah, I'd have to say it's an issue. Like technology has its teething issues, like everything else does. Well, like the internet, television, radio, they all had their own impacts back in the day, for better and for worse. And the internet isn't all a one-sided thing. It's actually improved things for the better in some ways, in worse in others. Like the idea of when you're not on the clock, you're not on the clock. Now because of mobile phones and the internet, you're on the clock all the time, pretty much. Anyone can reach out to you whenever. And I personally don't like that. I never grew up in the time where that was not the case, but thinking about a time where you actually were detached from work or something like that, it actually does seem like it would be kind of nice. You actually had a separation in your life. But with each time comes different things, different issues, different great things, different bad things. It's just that our generation has its own special set of good and bad that's come with it, and the next generation will have their own set. But I would say, though, that the issue with people becoming more lonely is a major pressing issue, especially for our generation, because a lot of people find a lot of comfort in the internet. It's a comfortable thing. You can pretty much turn it into whatever you want and kind of live in your own world there. You don't have to try and conform to society or feel any pressure to conform to society because you're on the internet. There is no pressure at all there socially. You can find some group that fits with you, or something along those lines. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on to a couple of more questions because we are starting to run over time. So we don't want to keep this going on too long because we could always talk about all of those philosophical things, but maybe for tomorrow when we have a little bit more time. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And holy cow, LC39A just threw in another
Dang.
super chat, another massive one, by the way. And I think that brings LC39A's, let me do the math real quick. I think that's a total of a $400 donation. That is
Dang.
humongous support. The largest amount of super chat we've had in a very long time on the stream. And thank you very much, LC39A, for that massive support once again. Sincerely, big thank you. He said, I was a 60s hippie during the free love movement after my 3-year stint in the army, and life is good so far, LOL.
And I gotta say, a huge thanks to you for the support, LC39A. That is massive support that you've been throwing in tonight. We're massively thankful for that. And I also have to say, that's pretty interesting to hear, because I've heard some things about that era, and some people were like, "Oh, it was good." Some people were like, "Oh, it was bad." And one person I remember, actually, it was Bill Pfeiffer, the fella that I was talking about who served in Vietnam. He actually was living somewhere up around Ohio and Pennsylvania at that time, in Amish country in a sense. And so I asked him, "Oh, what was it like back then? Was it like that?" He said, "No, not really. It was more so Amish country, so we didn't have any of that stuff. You know, if you went into a big city, it was kind of like that, but it wasn't like that out in the country." And it's a really crazy thing, you know, because you're saying that it was like that in the 60s, and some other people in the 60s were living an entirely different life. And also, that's another interesting thing about how people experience certain parts of history. It's totally different for every single person. Some people are having a great time, some people are having a terrible time. Some people are in war, some people are in peace. Some people don't even deal with the cultural trends of that decade because they're just not living in the area where that was the vogue, you know, and some people do. It's really interesting because literally everyone's experience, even in a period of history like that, like in the 60s, which that's commonly known to be a very 60s thing. Some people just didn't even experience that like he did. He just told me, "Oh, you know, like, you know, we would work out, you know, around here and there, you know, it wasn't anything like that." It's such an interesting thing because when I'm 80, like you are, if I ever become 80, someone's gonna ask me, "Oh, what was life like for you?" You know, and then some guy who's 80 living in Washington State, he's gonna say a totally different thing about what life was like for him than what I said it was for me. And it's a weird thing to think about like that. Nothing is ever like a definitive, hard set block kind of a thing. Like it was like this for everyone everywhere. It was totally different for everyone everywhere, even in the same year, even in the same hour, in the same minute. So a huge thanks to you for the support, but very interesting and cool to hear, actually. And so I gotta say, good to know that you had a good time during that. And a huge thanks to you for the support. And also very cool to hear that you served as well. 3 years. Nowadays, the minimum contract, at least in the U.S. Army, is 4. They don't even let you do 2 years anymore or 3. It's got to be 4 at a minimum. And that's also something I'm like, dang, 4 years? Like 4 years is a long time. Like if we signed a 4-year contract in the Army, we like from the very day this channel blew up covering news, which was 3.5 years ago, we would still be in the military on the minimum length contract. And that's crazy. They don't even offer a 2-year contract anymore. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Connor Guartafiaro. And he puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Connor, for that support. He said, my great uncle, who served in the Korean War, died 5 days ago.
Oh.
And also my condolences to you, by the way. He said, I got to talk to him about it multiple times before his death. And he served as a chef in the U.S. Army in Korea.
That's I hate to hear about your loss, but that's actually really cool to hear. We actually had a family member that served during the Korean War, never was sent to Korea, but served during the Korean War I think as a surgeon in the Air Force. Pretty interesting thing. But I hate to hear that he passed 5 days ago. Very sorry for your loss. But I bet you he had some stories to tell. Generally, the Korean War is one hell of an interesting war, and considering that a lot of the World War II veterans are dying off at this point because they're quite literally reaching their hundreds right now, most of them are, even the youngest ones that served are reaching their hundreds. Finally, some of the people in the Korean War are getting a little bit of attention, and they're as old as the World War II people at this point, but their stories are as interesting as anyone else's, either from Vietnam, World War II, World War I, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of those places. And it's such a shame. It's honestly such a shame to know that their stories aren't really told a lot, because the Korean War is known as the forgotten war in America because it's never talked about. Like, you know, every once in a while someone will bring it up, oh, the Korean War, you know, and it really is only brought up as a part of why North Korea exists. But nobody ever talks about the Battle of the Busan Pocket or the landings at Incheon and the involvement of the Chinese, all that sort of thing, the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. You don't really hear about those sorts of things all too much because it's kind of a footnote in history, and I think it's a shame and a disservice to all those folks, because the Korean War was as brutal a war, more brutal a war really than Vietnam was, in a shorter period of time even. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well, but a big condolences to you once again for your loss. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next support here is a $2 donation from $2 Garage. And thank you very much, $2 Garage, as well, for that support. He said, get the taco thing. I'm not a fan myself, but I think he will go through with it on the deadline on Friday. And Putin made the mistake of attacking his ego and looking foolish.
I mean, that actually might be the case. Well, we'll have to see, but that might actually end up panning out to be correct. So a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts into 5. He said wage stagnation started in the 70s compared to CEOs' wages that increased exponentially as opposed to the workers. LFC all the way. Now, here's my thing, Andrew, with that. I don't mind if the CEO makes a whole bunch of money. Like, the CEO's making, like $1 million a year, or if they're making like $100 million a year. Like, like, my point is, any range whatsoever. Companies can pay their CEOs whatever they want to pay them. But the catch is, though, the workers, the workers obviously can't make as much as the CEO. I'm not, the people out there that say that, they're obviously a little bit delusional. It's like the CEO is the one that runs the whole company. The workers can't get that kind of pay. It's not the way it works. This isn't communism. So the workers just have to have a living wage. That's the only thing the workers want. They want to be able to simply live and not have to have multiple jobs. That's the thing. And if we can meet that standard, I think we'll go a long way. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, to be entirely honest with y'all, I find the idea of CEOs or individuals making an extremely exorbitant amount of money to be a little bit dangerous, generally for the carrying on of the nation. And I'll explain a little bit why. It has nothing to do with the whole idea of everyone's got to be paid the same, or, people deserve to get paid more. It has more so to do with the way the country is governed. Money is power, whether people want to know that or not. It's always going to be powerful. Even in the Soviet Union, money was incredibly powerful. And a country that claimed that they weren't even focused on the money was still wildly powerful. And when you have a lot of people who have an insanely exorbitant amount of money, whether it's real liquid assets or technically in stocks or in ownerships of stocks of a company, they wield a great deal of power. And those people pretty much end up becoming a pseudo wing of the government in its own right, because they're pretty much able to lobby and pay off people in the government to do what they want. And I generally find that to be an issue as far as running the country, because these people pretty much start to usurp the voters themselves, because they pretty much operate as a pseudo wing of the government through the influence they have by the massive amount of money that they have. So generally, looking at it from a perspective not a lot of people look at it these days, I think that CEOs and people who found companies are well deserving of the spoils of their success and their triumphs. I'd certainly say that that's the case. But at the same time, I'd also have to say that they shouldn't be allowed to amass such a great wealth that they end up pretty much becoming a pseudo wing of the government in its own right. I mean, you can look at recently a decent amount of examples. I mean, there's one right now, a little musky example, or maybe another one that bloomed a little bit like an iceberg. That one as well. You look at them and you go, that's a little bit odd that they pretty much are operating as a pseudo part of the government, because they pretty much fund everyone in it. And I find that to be a risk to democracy in itself. Not to say that they're supposed to be wiped out and have the savings or income of an average person. Obviously not. That would pretty much completely removes the competitiveness of our capitalistic system. But at the same time, we also can't let the capitalistic system run so wildly out of control that these people pretty much end up running the government instead of the people themselves through the votes. I think
you got to address that problem you're mentioning right there. You got to address that with the politicians that are being influenced, instead of addressing it by cracking down on the businesses. Me personally, I think that's attributing the blame to the wrong place, because capitalism is supposed to be it's supposed to be regulated, obviously, but the CEOs and the people that start the businesses or run the businesses are supposed to be able to earn as much money as they can. And it should be allowed, in my personal opinion. But the part that shouldn't be allowed is those individuals shouldn't be able to take that vast amount of wealth that they're earning and then use that to influence the government to therefore screw over the common man, that they're already being greedy and screwing them over in the first place by not giving them an honest living wage at the bottom levels of their company. That's the problem. And they need to basically, here's the thing, ban the lobbying, ban all these super PACs, ban all this big interest, big money, things like that in politics. If you get rid of that, it solves like 90% of our problems. But the problem is, though, to get to that point, to actually banning it, that is such a humongous mountain to climb. That's like climbing Mount Everest or something these days when it comes to trying to fix that.
I would have to say that generally, like, I'm not saying, tax people into oblivion here. Just want to make that clear. But as far as taxing people high margins, especially on high incomes like that, I think that it makes sense. Because if you look at technically the most economically prosperous times for most everyone in this country's history, you'll notice that the highest tax brackets for income tax on the federal level were near to 90%. That was during the Eisenhower administration, the Kennedy administration, FDR. Some of the greatest economic periods seen in this country, the income tax brackets at their highest levels were reaching 90%. And then once you see that it starts to drop down, especially in the present day where the highest is about 40, then you start to see that that's where the stagnation starts to come in, because these people, because they're not paying a large amount of taxes, where the government pretty much is the one controlling the money. So generally the people themselves are controlling the money through extension of the government. Then you have these individuals that are controlling the money, and then they're pretty much controlling the government. And it's not to say that we need to make these people poor. I mean, obviously, I think that there ought to be multi-billionaires in this country, but at the same time, though, they shouldn't be able to have such an extreme amount of wealth. They can literally just lobby for anything, anywhere, and pretty much rig the system. That would be generally my statement. Not saying, though, like, I'm not trying to make this a political thing, but generally, if you look at the metrics, it didn't matter back then what political party was in charge. A lot of people consider the time that this tax bracket existed to be an economically successful time for everyone, not just for a few.
Yeah. Well, tell that to the voters. All these voters just want to vote based on their emotions instead of looking at what these people actually represent. That's a huge problem. I'm not sure how you solve that, because here's the huge problem as well. Another secondary problem. In addition to the problem with money being in politics, which shouldn't be allowed in the first place, that's problem number one. Problem number two is you have these tech oligarchs, if you want to call them that, these humongously wealthy tech billionaires that run and own these tech companies, like, for example, all the social media platforms. These individuals can conspire with one another to push certain content that promotes a certain candidate. Not saying that they're doing that, but it's possible. They can push certain content to promote a certain candidate that they want to get elected, and convince voters, which are not the most informed people in the world. Not every single voter is well informed about the candidate. Most people vote on emotion, they vote on looks, they vote on superficial aspects. And they don't look at these people for what they are. Like, for example, if some candidate out there is being funded heavily by the pharma industry, most people will never know because they don't look deep enough. They don't have the time to look into it. Some people, unfortunately, don't have the intelligence to look into it. And everybody's allowed to vote. So people will unknowingly elect somebody who is heavily, deeply entrenched and basically compromised by big money, and they'll have no clue. So, I mean, it's a problem with the voter base these days as well. People don't have the desire to educate themselves, and without a proper education of the voter base, and also the banning of lobbying, and also big money in politics, it's going to keep running amok.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I would personally have to say, in my opinion, here's what I'd say, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what I believe would be a perfect or more perfect kind of a society for the future of the country. The nation should be able to see that the wages of its workers in the labor force are high enough that in a married joint household, only one of the spouses has to work. The other one can stay at home and raise the children. Whether that be the woman or the man, that's up for that family to decide. It's a free country. But as far as it's concerned with each individual household, the future of our nation lies in our ability to raise that future generation. And if we continue to see that the situation is so bad economically that both members of the household, both the husband and the wife, have to work 3 jobs and work until they're working themselves down to the bone to be able to afford bare basics, they're not ever going to decide to have children, and they're not certainly ever going to raise them well if they have them. So we need to make sure that this country prioritizes this long-term success instead of the short-term success, aka the success of the GDP and the shareholders above everything else. Otherwise, we're not going to have a nation around for those people to even be proud of, or anyone to be proud of for that matter. It's an important thing. But anyways, with that, it looks like we're synergizing. Matthew. But with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Butchie777, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Butchie, for that support as well. And we do appreciate that
Hey!
very, very much. I do not see a comment attached. I want to make sure, though. I want to double check because, yeah, there's no comment. There was a super chat, though. They put in the YouTube creature falling out of the chair and got wrecked. So I'm very unfortunate for him. He should have bought a better chair. But thank you very much, Butchie, for that support. We also have a $2 support from Jimmy Oldham. And thank you very much, Jimmy, as well, for that support. We also have a 2 from Bobo Vasquez. He said, "This is all I can afford." And we appreciate any support, Bobo, and it's very much appreciated.
Yeah, that's huge support, really. I mean, like a $2 support is still huge support because you could have supported with nothing. So we thank you massively for that. Whether it was 500 or 2, we're always hugely appreciative, Bobo. And you're an old guard as well. And we just thank you for being here, really, at this point. I mean, you've bared with us longer than most people would. So a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Cody Fritz, who puts in a 2. He said, "Laid off so much, laid off so not much to give. Keep it up and much love."
And I hate to hear that, Cody Fritz, but I hope you find a new job and a better paying one, hopefully. But a big thanks to you for the support, and I hope that things are going to be on the up and up for you here soon. But a big thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 2. And Andrew said, "One receives the most fire when they are on target." Honestly, Andrew, I was telling the enforcer that yesterday. I was telling, your name's Andrew and his name's Andrew, so I just got me confused there for a second. But I was telling Andrew that the other day. I was saying you'd much rather have people saying something about you than have nobody saying anything at all. It's kind of like the theory that all press is good press. And I don't want people to identify that with the current president because he believes that too. But the problem is I don't want press that's like so bad because I'm actually doing bad things. I don't want that kind of bad press. But if people just have a bad opinion about you or a good opinion because they don't like your style or something, me personally, I think all press is good press. That's what I'm a big believer of. But enforcer, what say you?
I generally am fine with any press, but I like it to be good if it can be. Because if you're getting bad input from everyone, might be time to start changing something. Like that would be my personal opinion.
Oh no, not everybody. Like obviously, if everybody's saying like this person's doing this, I don't like it. And literally everybody's repeating that, then you might probably want to change that, or otherwise you might run people off. But if there's like a small 10% or 5% group that's saying one thing just to run their mouth because they're just the modern term, they're haters, if you want to call them that, then that's fine as well. It's all press. At least somebody's saying something about you. If nobody's saying anything, then you must not be making any waves because nobody's even saying anything.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I see some people saying some things, Matthew, in the chat really quick. Someone said, everyone ought to stop, let's see, term limits are the solution, stopping gerrymandering. I've been hearing about that, but here's the thing, though. I'm only bringing this up because I want to say this. Everyone's acting like right now, because the state of Texas is gerrymandering, it's an issue on one side. Gerrymandering has been happening in this country for the longest time on every side, in every party, because every party is trying to screw over the other one. And that is something that is messed up. It's messed up across the board whenever anyone tries to gerrymander, because it's disenfranchising voters in different districts, whether they be in the city, whether they be in the country. It's attempting to disenfranchise those voters from actually being represented in the government properly. And I'm a heavy opponent against any kind of gerrymandering, but to understand the issue with gerrymandering, you can't understand it as a partisan issue. You have to understand it as something that is a political issue across the board, because both Republicans and Democrats gerrymander in states where they have a majority to ensure that they never lose the majority. So that is a huge issue. That's not anything that's even political. That is just an endemic issue that we see in the country these days that needs to be addressed. But anyways, I hope that does address that well. But there's a lot of things that could be done to fix the country. I would say certainly trying to fix gerrymandering would be one of them. Because now we can see that there's a gerrymandering war going on, because now Texas is trying to gerrymander in their way. And so now California, and I've heard that Illinois are also starting to gerrymander in their own. And now, people go, it's justified. Now, it's never justified. It's so because the state of Texas wants to disenfranchise some of its voters, now it's within the prerogative of other states to continue this injustice and disenfranchise their voters, their citizens of their states? No, certainly not. That shouldn't be the answer. The answer should be to come together, to condemn what's happening in a place like Texas, say, where it's just generally starting this whole thing that we're seeing right now, and to say that this is unacceptable and it's undemocratic. That should be the answer, instead of trying to continue this injustice and then spread it across the whole country. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Jesse Schaefer, who puts in a 5, who said, Ukraine question, volatile. Have y'all ever considered the timing of Snowden defecting to Russia and the Russian manipulation? Honestly, I generally withhold comment on Snowden. I generally don't comment on him, but I'm going to have to pass on that question just because, not to like just blow your question off all the way, but I try to avoid Snowden for personal reasons. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I think I'd have to dodge that one as well, me personally. But I do thank you for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Knox Date, who puts in a 5. He said, tension is rising, and what's the odds of World War III 2025?
I would say that the odds are getting on up there. I would say at this point it's probably around 30 to 35%, maybe, which, if y'all notice, it is exponentially rising. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know right now. And a big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, folks, we are running massively over time tonight. So we are going to be grabbing 3 live chat questions, the Morse code decoders, and then rounding out the stream for the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
And the Morse code decoders for the night are Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Airbug Garbo, Heroa Fluffiness, and Kush. They said the Morse code says, however this goes, these are the final hours before things will change for good or bad in LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got that down to the nail. That was the jackpot. And I got to congratulate y'all greatly for continuing to get that Morse code message correct time and time again, because the least string armor signal corps never misses the message. And so a huge congratulations to y'all once again. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the next ones. Also, David Gear, I saw you say most states of a certain political type have done this, and apparently it's only bad when another one does it. No, it's generally bad. What I say is it's generally bad across the board. It doesn't matter which party or which state is doing it. Gerrymandering is disenfranchising voters. It should be something that is unanimously condemned when it happens, and the answer should never be by anyone to go, oh, so there's an injustice happening here, so let's do it in our state now to get back at them. It's like you're only spreading around this injustice that's going on, and it's already been going on for a while. It's like that honestly is one of the bigger issues that ought to be addressed that no one will address, because it could affect their ability to get reelected if they start to try and fix some of these issues. But it's a big one, in my opinion, on all sides. That's how I look at it. So I don't know how other people are looking at it out there in the greater world, but on my personal opinion, the whole gerrymandering thing, whether it be done by the left or the right, it's a terrible thing. It's disenfranchising people. I find it to be undemocratic. But with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than AF Kaplan, who said, assuming the sanctions against Russia are implemented, could the U.S. follow them up perhaps with a cyber attack? And what do you think?
I would say that we could possibly follow them up with a... I'm trying to find this question here really quickly. Where is it, Matthew?
It's highlighted in blue.
Oh, here we go. Let's see. We could follow them up with cyber attacks. We rarely ever go on the offensive in the cyberspace, however, but we could, technically. So I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And also, by the way, I just wanted to say, big shout out to El Cacer, by the way, who threw in a super chat earlier. We did address that one. I think I forgot to say the $2 with it. So a big shout out for the $2 support, by the way. But we did address the question earlier, though. I think I forgot to say the $2 for whatever reason. But thank you very much, El Cacer, for that support once again. And it was the comment about the Andrew one, by the way. That was the question. But moving on to our next live chat question here. This one goes to Avari Mandabratis, who said, how many Chinese, Iranian, and North Korean forces will be in Belarus participating in these exercises?
From what we understand, it'll be practically none, at least as far as the Chinese, the Iranians, and the North Koreans. We do know that there will probably be some Chinese military liaisons, but that's literally a handful of them. Not a great deal. Name, bless me. But I hope that does address that well, because as far as any of those armed forces being involved, it would be slim to none from what we know right now and based off of prior Zapad exercises. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so who was the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Andrea Fed, who said, I'd love to hear what you guys think of Japan's new railgun.
I actually haven't heard about that. I would have to do a little bit more digging into that, because I do know that the Japanese are big into speed. Like, they already have the maglev train. It's one of the fastest in the world that they're still testing out at the moment right now, and it is a piece of work. I mean, it's really impressive stuff. But unfortunately, I wouldn't really know about their railguns at the moment, so I'll have to look into that a little bit off air and unfortunately declare ignorance on that for now. But with that in mind, folks, we've almost reached the 4-hour mark on this stream, and it's time for us to finally round this thing out. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. We had a peak viewership of 16,000 people here tonight, and 170,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. I've got to thank you all so much once again for finding this channel to be your primary source of news, and if you enjoyed this channel tonight and you're brand new to it, please make sure to subscribe. We run this stream 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every day but Mondays, and y'all can always count on us to put out the same kind of quality, research, depth, and efforts that we put into it tonight. So with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the Republic, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight on day 1260 of the War News stream. And also a huge shout out to all 170,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. And we will see you all tomorrow on the short war video if there is enough news to cover. Tomorrow, I will be making a short war video if there is one to make. And also, of course, be sure to join us again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next nightly War News stream. But with that, of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.